No, for- Yeah, ready with it.
Call to order this meeting of the Plan Commission. It is Tuesday, March 15, 2022, 6:35 PM. And first item of business will be roll call
Brian Duffin,
here.
Sharon Christensen. Here. Arlen Guy,
Here.
Dave Hageman,
Here.
Andy Blumstrom,
Here.
Arlen Christensen,
Here.
Tim Yanushek.
Here. Very good. And third item, approval of February 15th, 2022 Plan Commission minutes.
Move to approve.
Moved by Arlen with an A and seconded by Tim. Right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion passes. Item 4, public comments. Jared Hoy, 823 Whispering Oak Road, requesting the driveway variance. Is that
Correct.
Okay, what is it you're wanting to do, Jared?
Good evening. Thanks for taking time for us tonight. My name is Jared Hoy. This is my wife, Courtney Hoy.
Hi.
So we live on the corner of Whispering Oaks and Marie Road. You can see a map up there. Thank you. Our plot of land is kind of long and it runs down. It's probably more along Marie Road actually than it is Whispering Oaks. Our driveway comes out to Whispering Oaks. And the way, if you've been by there, if you know that area, we're on a big hill, there's really not any opportunity to put any sort of additional garage or storage or shed or anything out the front side of our driveway. It's all kind of a hill and then our well is there. So we looked at what we're proposing to do is put a garage down kind of at the bottom end of our property off of Marie Road, and we're going along happily, getting a couple contractors to bid on the work, and had Arlen out for the driveway permit, not really knowing this is the first time for us. And Arlen kindly informed us that there's an ordinance that we can only have one driveway per residential lot. And so we're here tonight to ask for that variance for a second driveway. And sort of the unique part, and you can read through the packet, I won't go through all of this, is there's a trail. We've been at our property at 823 for, this is going to be our 5th summer, I think. And there's sort of a half trail, half driveway, half road that runs, and you can see in the pictures. I actually snapped another picture without the snow on it if anybody wants to see this on my phone, but that already runs up and runs through the back of kind of up. There you go. Thank you. Runs up to the back of our lot. And then a number of neighbors use that trail to get to the back of their property as well. Our neighbor Dave Kerr put in a big sort of terraced retaining wall on the back of his property, and he brought all the trucks and all the heavy equipment back through there. So it's sort of a natural spot that we thought wouldn't be too invasive, that we could site our garage right next to that and then have that driveway. And so we would, there's plans in there, we'd observe, of course, and we'd be back asking for a permit, excuse me, for, all the proper setbacks and whatever. And that driveway would really be from wherever that, that setback starts to the garage itself, which I think right now on the plans is 24 by 33 deep. So yeah, there's another picture. So, certainly entertained. Once we talked to Arlen, we thought, is there any way we can possibly use our existing driveway so we don't have to come here and ask for this variance? There's really no feasible way for us, because to the right of that picture there is a pretty steep hill. I mean, it'd be a deal breaker. It would cost more to put in a driveway through there and regrade all that than it would to build the whole garage. So the other piece just to the right of that picture, which we didn't really take pictures of, is a natural area that we're kind of transitioning into a Savannah oak kind of area, and we've cleared all that nasty honeysuckle and buckthorn and everything out of there. So it's kind of a nice spot on the corner. A lot of our neighbors have enjoyed, which is why we want to kind of get down from that and not disturb that area. So and I guess the last thing I'll say, and certainly open to questions, I don't want to take too much of your time. One of the things I thought that might be helpful for the commission here in the town board is to demonstrate that we have tried to engage our neighbors. So the last sheet in the packet there is, we walked around, trying to get as many signatures as we can to show that folks, understand what we're doing, support our project, don't really have any problem. I call my, Mary Heath, who's, if you're familiar with the area, she's right next to us. She's kind of got that berm house where the land goes right up to the roof. And she called me tonight and she said, make sure you know that I'm fine with this. I have no problem with it being on, on our property. So just in try to engage the community about it, to demonstrate that it's not something that, folks are gonna take exception to. But I guess I don't know what I'm missing. Courtney, is there anything? Okay, so I guess with that, that's our ask is for that driveway variance.
There's questions. You've been out there.
I was out there and I could, this driveway looks like it's been in there a long time. Like you say, the trucks that went into, and it's down away from the corner quite a ways. So it's not a safety hazard or nothing. And even there's snow on there right now, but I don't think we'll even need a culvert because it comes right straight up off the road. So I can see nothing wrong with it.
Slope's not a problem.
No,
Any length? How long?
no, it's not that long that we'd have to worry about length because it goes up and then his building will be back in here. You just go up into the,
No bump outs needed.
no,
then,
no,
Anything like that.
no.
I'm just gonna summarize. I think, if I recall, back in the late 90s, I was doing driveway permits. And I think somebody got a variance then, but they didn't proceed with it. And I didn't take time to look for a permit, which wouldn't be any good anyway, because they didn't complete the project. I think the permit's only good for a year, that's what used to be. Back then, they didn't come to plan commission. That ordinance was pretty easy, and it just came to the board, it didn't go to plan commission. But I'm almost positive we gave a variance for that back in the late 90s, like 98 or 99. But then nothing went through, so.
Yeah, I don't recall a variance ever coming to the plan.
Right. And we didn't do them until we got the new ordinance standards that we have when we updated it probably in what, 2005 or 6 or 4, whatever it was. Before that, it was there wasn't much of an ordinance.
So if the town board would like a recommendation from the plan commission, we would be glad to do that tonight, if that's what you're seeking.
That's what we're
But it
looking
is the
for.
town board's
Yep.
decision.
Correct. I would just say, when you put in your motion, if you're gonna approve this, is I would say you're gonna you're really gonna give them 2 variances. One for another driveway and one no culvert. But I would almost think we need to put a stipulation there. It's either have to be wash rock or blacktop or cement or something. Because I'm concerned the water run that way, if he puts in like just 1.5 inches rock, it's gonna wash away. But are you okay with that if I don't know if we need to put it in there. I know 3-inch wash rock is kind of rough to drive over, but it will slow the water down.
Yeah, and it's so the rest of the story for us is this is not something we would use necessarily day to day. We sold a lake property up north, so we just got stuff. I've got my boat. I'd like to store it in the winter in there. So it's not going to be something, it's far away from our house. It's not like we're parking cars in there. We would we would commit to, putting asphalt or that 3-inch wash rock anyway. That'd probably be part of our plan. So that is definitely not a deal breaker for us. If it kind of preserves that area and keeps it from washing out, that would be not an issue for us.
I'm just thinking, just for the concept of coming on the road, if it does get cut down a little bit, because I'm sure you got to put gravel in anyway to make a decent driveway.
Yeah.
You might stir it up and make it erode later. So I was just trying to prevent that if we, did something like that. That's just my thoughts when I want to look at it.
Harlan, any concerns with allowing?
I was looking in here and we do have a section here for variance that does allow variance for relief from this. Question I guess I would ask of the applicant is, how many acres is this property?
It's 1.13.
1.13. And this is at the low end of the lot?
Correct. It's on the northeast side of the lot. It's It's funny when you look at, it, you wouldn't even necessarily, there's a long stretch of no houses, so it's not even really stacked on top of our house. It's down at that bottom side. You wouldn't even really recognize that it's ours. It's just kind
Well,
of,
I don't see the neighboring properties. How far is the nearest intersection from this garage?
intersection or like the next driveway.
Next,
Yeah,
well, it's more of an intersection.
Oh, it's
the intersection.
100 yards or 100 feet probably
Oh, yeah.
from.
Well, I mean, what would you say, Arlen? Up to corner of Marie and Whispering Oaks?
It's gotta be a couple hundred feet back from Whispering Oaks down to where this driveway is gonna be, yeah.
I know I mow it all the time and I get tired every time if I push more all the way up. Yeah, and then on the sort of the, yeah, so from where her cursor is on the screen right there to the left, up to the corner, that would be that couple hundred feet to the intersection. And then to the right, down to the corner of our property, if you keep going, I would say another 50 to 75 feet, you've got the neighbor's driveway going up. And that's the neighbor, Mary, I was talking to you about that called me tonight.
And this is, and you're going to be using the existing access road?
Well, so that's still to be determined. We could put it right on the existing access road, or we could put it right next to it.
What are you planning on doing?
Well, the ideal state, and I think we're negotiable. The ideal state would be to put it right next to it. And the reason why I say that is because that existing access road going up is what our neighbors continue to use. So if we put the garage right on that, we'll probably end up putting another trail next to it, taking down some more trees, because that's that access. It's the only way you can get to our backyard for, you know, like with a mower or anything. So the ideal state would be to put it right next to that and just have that trail right up to the side, if that makes sense. But if the town board of the planning commission were to say that'd be a deal breaker and we really want it right on top of that, we'd figure that out, you know.
So the reasons you're asking for additional access here rather than a garage near your current driveway is because
There's probably an 8-foot drop off the edge of our driveway into the wooded area.
to the right of the driveway?
And then our well is on the other side.
And there wouldn't be enough, we're butted up on that top side of that picture there, we're butted up pretty close to the neighbor's area. Be hard to put anything into the left and the right, it drops off pretty quickly.
From the house down to Marie, Arlen, I think it must drop 25 feet, right down like this. And there's all the trees in there. So that's why one reason he can't, he'd have to take all the trees out, then he'd have to build it all up to make a driveway in there. That's what he's looking for.
That'd be difficult. The trees are keeping it from eroding as is. So
Right.
we don't want to take them out.
I'm
I'm
sure
sure
it's a big-
they are.
It's a big oak area, which it's, you know, we bought the home like that, we understand that that's our choice to, you know, but.
Sharon, thoughts?
I guess I don't see any problems with it. It's a unique lot. And you can't do everything that you would prefer to do because of the topography. So sometimes you have to work with what you got.
Tim?
I like the observation that it's a unique lot and so a variance from what everybody else has to do would fit this situation. I also like Wayne's idea that there should be some, this owner may only use that driveway occasionally for access, but who knows, once the variance is granted, future owners will own it too, for whatever use they wish to put it to. So the idea that they would take some kind of steps to control erosion there, I think is a good one. I don't know how that goes into a motion, but that would probably be my recommendation.
Andy?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it, and I think they got a good plan, considering the way their lot is.
Thank you.
I think it's a good way to do it.
David?
Yeah, I drove by today. I guess the question I got for you is I see there's a kind of unique, we have a curb out in our township.
Yeah,
How are you gonna, what was your thought, or how are you gonna get off of whatever you're putting in for driveway onto the road with that curb there? You're gonna cut that curb out? You're gonna lay a 4x4 in there just when you need to drive over it, or?
So I don't know what the rules are about curbs. I sort of jokingly said that last thing that you said. Worst scenario is for the few times that I pull in there, I put a little ramp up the curb, or I just bump my boat trailer over the curb. Of course, all things being equal, if I had the ability or if it was granted to me to be able to cut into that curb, that's what I would do, but I don't. This is the first time for me, and I don't know what
I
that.
don't say with uniqueness of how steep that is. If you were to cut out that curb, I think we kind of want to think about some permanent material in our concrete or asphalt up just a few yards. For sure, if we're gonna take that curb out, I think that kind of helps keep the land, shaped up, because it is kind of steep when you look up that.
I mean, the curbs are for a reason.
Right, so. I don't know what to say about that, it's just an
I would-
observation. Otherwise, I have no problems with
Yeah.
it, and I'm comfortable having the garage off to the side of the thing, so you just got a straight shot up in there. Last thing you need is put that steep thing in the wintertime.
I guess I would say if the curb's gonna get cut out, then I'd say it has to be cemented.
Yeah.
The apron would have to be cemented back
Yep.
6-8 feet
Yep.
to keep erosion,
Yeah.
because now you're lowering that driveway another 6-8 inches.
Back to the lot line.
Yeah. That's the way I would see it, I mean, that curb's there for a reason. Don't take it out and don't put nothing there to stop it.
Right,
It could start washing on the backside of that curb. I didn't think of that, but.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to us. Like I said,
So I guess it'd be kind of up to you if you want to drive over it or if you want it out. If you want it out, we should know tonight so that they can make that decision.
I think ideally we'd want it out.
Yeah.
So, and we would just
Yep.
commit to asphalting or cementing it.
putting
Just trying to prevent erosion down the road
Oh.
here.
Yep, our cabin was on a hill, this house is on a hill, I don't like erosion either.
That's a good point.
Arlen? You seem
Yeah,
to be all right.
after, I'm fine.
That I would entertain motion for approval or denial. Arlen?
Yes, I move that we grant the variance to allow a driveway for the proposed garage, the proposed location. That if there's a curb there, that it sounds like a condition would be that the driveway needs to be paved, hard surface paved to prevent road. To be doing, making sure that the erosion or water that's coming down from Marie Road is not going to cause an erosion situation. Support of this is a unique lot, unique situation, and the contours of the property sort of dictate that this is a reasonable solution and allowable and should be allowed as a variance.
And to Wayne's request regarding, was it washed rock or
Well, they agreed to cement,
If
so
they
I think that's what we should
cement,
do.
that's.
Either cement or asphalt.
Yeah, okay, a hard surface.
If we're gonna cut the curb out, I would say it's gotta be either asphalt or cement. I would not agree with just
I think
washed
they
out.
got a number
should
of-
be able to wrap those ends around and
Right.
ramp it up,
Yes,
within a couple feet.
right. Right.
So
with
that it
cement
won't, it
or
won't,
blacktop,
it won't
yeah.
run behind the curb.
Right.
You got a number of feet on the apron?
How back far would you wanna go? Is 10 feet comfortable with you? 10, 12 feet?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, our idea would be to put it as close to the road within the allowed the setbacks. And so however far the driveway needs to come up for
So-
that.
That brings me on another question. I think the ordinance reads they gotta be 20 or 24 feet wide. How wide do you want this driveway? We're gonna have to make a variance for that too. It's not gonna be as wide. You don't want it that wide, right?
I don't need it that wide,
No.
not even close,
I think the
so.
ordinance reads what, 20 or 24?
22, 24, so.
So we need to do a variance also on the width of the driveway. You don't want it, you don't need that width of a driveway.
No, I mean, the less we can be invasive to that natural area, the better. I know I'm the guy putting the garage in, but if I don't need to have a huge wide driveway.
They got a 16-foot door anyway, so.
Right, but
But the driveway,
the driveway's gonna go up and the door is gonna go that way. I mean, 12 feet be sufficient?
Our
for you?
ordinance says 12 feet.
12 feet on the finished, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, take it all the way out to the road with
Well,
that.
I want the driveway as wide as their opening for their door. I mean,
Well, this
you
is
don't want
just-
a narrower driveway. It's a
This is
16
going up
foot
Yeah,
door.
to,
the driveway, Andy's gonna go past the garage.
I thought it was coming into the,
It's gonna go past, and it looks like they're gonna have a little lot or area to turn into here.
oh, okay, I thought this faced the road. No, it doesn't. Okay. I understand now.
Arlen, you want to add that to your
I-
motion?
Certainly I can add that to, that'd be a 12-foot wide
driveway,
curb cut.
right,
Yeah, minimum.
right. 12 foot finished.
Or max. Is that a minimum?
12 foot. I don't think I'll go more than 12. I would say 12 foot max. It has to be 12 foot. Let's put it that way. And that's wide enough, you're thinking?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So let's just make it a figure of either 10 or 12 foot, whatever you want to do.
Add that to
I
the
wouldn't go any
motion.
Smaller than 10.
So how's this gonna work?
Any discussion or second to Arlen's motion?
I'll second
So Arlen with
So
an
this
E
is the road on this.
makes the motion, Arlen with an A, seconds the
it.
motion.
The other way around.
Did I can't spell it. You got it, Stephanie?
AKAC, that's how I do it.
Any further discussion on this? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. We have a variance in place, actually about 3 of them, but sounds like it's the best situation for what you're working on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to the town with that. I think some people would have just used that old driveway and tried to sneak it out for a while.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Okay. Item 5, discussion possible action. Is it Nick and Laura?
Yep.
Am I saying that right? Nick and Laura Wilmot, 5596 Windridge Road.
I'll come over here so you don't have to twist around.
All right.
That would be on page 4 of your packet. So I know some of you guys were present the last time we were here and some of you weren't. So just a general recap. Right now we have roughly 2 2-acre lots that are long and skinny like a hot dog. Something fishy went down when they built our lot and there's a lot of like deed restrictions on our second acreage. It's really messy title work. So we've been working with the county since we purchased it to try and figure out how do we make this less of a nightmare in case we ever sell and just in general. And so what they had recommended is that we either do a 3-acre lot and a 1-acre lot or one whole lot. So get rid of our 2 lot lines. So we came in front of the board November, October, I'm not really sure when, and proposed it to you guys, and you guys wanted to see it or recommended that we put it into 1 lot, because the town requires 2-acre lot minimums and didn't want to make an exception to do a 3 and a 1. So we hired a surveyor and we have it in 1 lot, and we are looking for approval of actually putting it into 1 lot now to get a nice clean deed.
So where's the second lot?
Yes, so can I come up to this?
Yes.
Okay.
I can show you right here.
Okay,
So this dotted line.
I'll answer it for everybody else.
Well,
So
what's
our
con- what's
current lot
confusing
line is
is
this dotted line.
One lot.
So
third
it
lot
splits
15, that's lot
here and
59.
here as our 2 lines, and then this line here is our driveway back to our house.
Lot-
So this would be
what
lot 1
would
and lot
become
2.
one
So
lot.
59 and 60 were you 2 platted lots,
Yeah, correct,
and you're combining that into 1 CSM lot.
correct.
It's a little
Yeah.
misleading by it saying lot 1 right here. That's what the new lot would be. Oh, lot 60 and lot 59 is existing. And it would become 1 lot.
And you're just a fudge short of 4 acres, so you can't split it into 2 separate.
So
We
fun
don't want
fact, Access Dane has us listed as 4.07 acres, so we lucked out. We lost a little bit of acreage somewhere, so now we don't have to rezone.
The surveyor replied that they were 186 square feet and these guys got 189 square feet, so damn near on the nuggets.
Yeah.
So it's pretty accurate.
That's a technical term.
Oh, okay,
But
perfect.
to your point, you want to change it from 2 hot dogs to a burrito.
Yes,
Yes.
which is much more enjoyable to most, so. But yeah, lot 60 is the one with the messy restrictions on it, so.
So you are aware then that should these be combined together, that there will be no going back to splitting it to get a.
That's the idea.
Unless the ordinance for whatever reason would change, correct? Like
So-
if you guys all of a sudden would allow 1 acre lots, then we would potentially have the ability to do it, but.
Would you
Yeah.
object to a deed restriction being placed on that lot so that if a future buyer should be interested in it, they would realize that they could not divide it and have another building site?
I prefer it not have it, but if that's what it really takes, then that's fine.
Yeah, I'm throwing it out there. I'll let the plan commissioners decide maybe.
It wasn't-
way they
It
think it should
originally
go.
was a buildable lot. So what happened, and I can just give you the backstory. When I talked with Roger from Dane County, what he says is fishy is somehow our septic system was allowed to go over here on the other lot. And so it was all fine and dandy, and then a few years passed and Dane County Sanitary Department realized the septic system was over there and put a deed restriction on it. So what we wanted to do is we tried, we worked with you guys in Dane County to parcel this out to be 2 acres under the assumption we were still over 4 acres. But because you guys had a restriction on how far out the lot line had to be from our driveway, we couldn't hit it and still have the septic system on the other lot. So that basically was like, we have to put it into 1 lot then.
So it sounds like the county already has deed restrictions on that.
Yes, and actually, I think Stephanie has the communication from Dane County stating about the deed restrictions and what we like that it would. Yeah.
So we don't have one here on the township, so the plan commissioners, let's see what they have to say about it. Arlen with an A. I got the letter right this time. Any thoughts regarding any problems with combining the 2 lots that you can see?
I think we have more problems when they're divided rather than combined.
It's easier to combine them, isn't
It's
it?
easier to combine.
Any thoughts as far as deed restricting the property?
Well, it needs to be, usually that'd be something that if they had 13 acres instead of 3.99 acres, then the deed restriction may make some sense. Doesn't make any sense now.
Okay. Sharon, your thoughts?
I have no negative thoughts about it. I think combining it's a good thing.
Any thoughts regarding deed restriction? You think it should or should not be?
I would like to see one there, but I guess I don't see a reason for it. Unless at some point in time they change the rules and regulations. I mean, right now, it can't be divided because you can't get 2 acre lots there. But down the road, who knows?
You're ex-real estate person. Would there be a issue with a future buyer if it was not deed restricted or didn't show a deed restriction?
I don't think that makes a big deal of difference because every buyer thinks they can come in and kind of do whatever they want. And they see a deed restriction, they think, oh, we'll get rid of that. Somehow they think they can get rid of them, and obviously we know that they can. So I guess I'm leaning towards what good are they?
All right. Tim, your thoughts?
I don't see a problem with omitting a deed restriction. It's a CSM that will be on record, that will give notice to future owners that this is a single parcel. They think they can change it later on, they would have to come in and ask us or ask the county to allow it. So I think without the deed restriction, we'd be adequately protected.
Okay, Andy?
Well, I don't have a problem with it, but I know in the past and I can think of at least 2 instances where we've had a thing like this and we didn't deed restrict the second lot, and then they came back 5 years later and separated them and then built on that other lot. I can think of at least 2 of them right off the top of my head. I have no problem with the deed restriction if that's what you want. And I know, I guess I have a question. If they can they use the right of way to for their acreage to increase that so they could have 2 2-acre lots? Because we do that on everything but a CFM, and a CFM doesn't include the right of way.
I can answer that for you. So because of where our septic system sits, even if you were to increase the right of way, we still can't get the
I
2
think,
acres.
I can think of one other instance like that in Raven Oaks, where the septic system was on the second lot and they still built a house there. Oh, I don't know what, they put another system in or what they did, but
Oh, God,
and
that's-
if we were building a Dwayne Miller, that's the one I'm thinking of right now.
If another house were to get built on that second lot, it would be downhill of the septic system.
Okay, well, whatever you want to do, I think is fine.
I'd be bad.
If you're okay
location.
with it, I certainly don't have a problem. I'm just trying to say, if you didn't, if you weren't okay with it, I wouldn't have a problem if you didn't put a deed restriction.
I'm fine with them combining it, and I guess because with our current rules and regulations, they can't get another home on there. So I would lean towards we don't need a deed restriction based on our current setup. And as things change, there's gonna be a lot of things change beyond this, so.
Got that right. Arlen,
I have no objections. Never mind.
Right, what's changing them from chopping that lot in half the other way to make their 2 separate lots, and the septic ain't an issue on the east? Either north and south, make it 2 separate lots, north and south.
We'd have to
We have to
completely
have a-
change the driveway and everything.
We would have to have a driveway easement, and that was not recommended by Dane County.
Or a driveway off of Windbridge.
That would run over
it
our
comes off of there
septic
now.
system then.
yes,
They won't let a driveway up here.
no, because this is the hill.
I'm just saying what if, because you could divide
And
it.
it's a good thought.
And then you could have a shared driveway there too for that second. For that first lot, if they ever wanted to, if the acreage is there.
With that hill, that'd be a nightmare spot.
Yeah,
for
we
driveway,
were-
too.
I'm
not-
only going off the theoretical, but we were told
You're
we
just
couldn't
thinking
ever,
hypotheticals.
we couldn't
Could-
do a
could
driveway
happen,
off
yeah.
the Hillcrest.
You guys are just talking your deed restrictions and what ifs. I mean, that septic up there really doesn't mean anything if you divide them lots the other way.
Yeah,
That's true.
Wouldn't get a driveway permit off.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get a driveway permit off the top of
You
that.
already,
hill.
no, but you could share a driveway coming in the bottom one.
Oh.
If you got a lot on the north and south side, Arlen, and then you share that driveway coming in, you could have your second lot right there. You know, and I know some of our discussion tonight is we're talking about where can we put other lots and house lots. There's a opportunity for one right there. Not saying they want to do it, but it's a possibility on your discussion of this, what you're gonna do with it. I didn't mean to step in on your meeting, but.
no, it's a good point. I don't think you can alter the platted lot as far as,
Can't do what?
I don't know if you can so the reason that they could put another house on there today is because their grandfathered in off the old plat, the platted. But the old plat shows the way those lots are
They'd
configured.
have to follow where that is.
Yeah, they'd have to
I
stick
don't
with,
think so, Brian. I think you can change those lots.
That's why I'm wondering if somebody'd let them come in and if they wanted to flip flop that around, there was another building site there. If you just change the way them 2
Yeah.
lots were, you're not creating another one that was already there.
Right.
I can tell you theoretically, it was an option, if that's what you're asking for.
What's
'cause
that?
Theoretically, that was an option. We did talk about doing 2 hamburger lots
With Dane County.
with Dane County.
And what did they say?
So the odds of them allowing us putting a driveway off the Hillcrest was pretty much null and void.
Correct.
We would also have to redo our entire septic system. Because where the driveway would have to come in, you're running right over our septic system.
Well, no, if you use the same driveway that's already there.
And then we chose not to do, we did not want a different deed restriction for shared driveway rules and regs on that. And so they recommend us to do this route. But to your point, it's possible. Like if we sell and somebody new comes in and wants to do it, they want to take that on, they can.
And I guess that's my point. So your options are available and open, that you don't tie your hands, you know.
Well, that's why we
Never say
initially-
never.
I hear you now.
That's why initially we were looking at the 3-in-1.
And
Because
us
we
as-
didn't want to get rid of the safety net that it brought to be able to offshoot a property if something happened.
And it's just part of our big meeting tonight with everybody here is how we want to do these splits and lots. And this is one that I think can
Makes sense.
work. Done right.
They're grandfathered in under the old plat, so they
Okay,
would
so
have,
even if you wipe out the old plat and do this,
that's what I'm
you're
not
still
sure of.
grandfathered?
I'm not sure.
Oh.
That's what I'm not sure about.
So
I-
there's one available there now, if they don't change the lot line.
They're grandfathered in with one right now, if they don't
I
change
guess
it.
it's their property, I probably should have just
Yeah,
kept my
it's,
mouth
it's,
shut.
it's their decision.
So when we
No,
talked
I-
with Dane County, we were not allowed to, like, what we were told is this basically wipes the slate clean. So what we had before, the ability to build on that lot completely goes away. And the only way for us to get it back would be if you guys either made the exception to do a 3-in-1 for the acreage, 3 acres and 1 acreage. Or if for some reason down the road, the town changed from having a 2 minimum acre lot to a 1, and then we did this all again, essentially. So we did want the 3-in-1, but I feel like we're a little committed at this point, so.
And if you're comfortable with combining the two,
We like all of it.
We don't want somebody down at the end of our driveway. That's where our deer live. So.
you don't want to get rid of those guys. Okay, I would entertain motion for approval or denial.
I'll make a motion, we approve it the way they want it there.
Moves to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Arlen with an A. Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the
Thank you,
same. Town board will make final decision on it, I think, but as far as the plan commission is concerned.
Not
Thank you.
Thank
So
you
we have to
guys.
come back though, right?
No.
Come
Come visit us anytime. You know, that was the last approval report that
So there's-
she
I'll sign
signed
it.
it when.
There's no
Whenever
reason-
you're ready.
we don't have
I'll
to.
sign
I don't believe so.
So,
There's
we
no
don't have
reason,
to.
it doesn't need a
So,
public hearing. because there's no reason.
First reading is gonna, I think the county has to
Right.
do.
I don't believe it needs to have a public
Yeah,
hearing.
It doesn't, and we double checked.
Anderson,
So
He has to do his
I think we're
review,
good.
and then once he signs off.
It's
on it,
just
you're
that
gonna get
extra
his signature.
for Jennifer to be able to sign.
Six
it.
days,
That's
9
right.
days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I have to coordinate with
Okay.
you.
I know the exact same thing happened in Dwayne
Okay.
His original house, but the lower part is right where his septic tank was, and he combined them. And then, of course, when he sold his house, he sold it, he split them again, and there's another house right where his septic tank was. So it can happen.
Yeah. I think
If
we're
that's
good.
what they want, that's what we
So
should
that's the
do.
only thing, do it right, get it right now while everybody's here and everybody's on the same
Yeah.
page, is my opinion.
Well, that's what they want, so we should give them
It
what they
is,
want.
it is. And 3 years from now, when they sell it, then we'll talk about it again.
Not gonna happen.
Communications.
Yes, I just have,
I know.
3 acres and 1 acre.
Oh, I'm sorry. If
Who's our one,
someone else with public comment?
Nick?
Kind of preliminary, just to get a reaction to what might be allowed. My name is Nick Thompson. I live on Grail Court, north end of Raven Oaks. Property goes right up to Purcell Road and Sales Trail on the north side of it, on like the northernmost property, right along Purcell Road. Year and a half ago, Brett Schillingstead had half of his property rezoned FP1, sold the other half. Now, this is a property on Purcell Road, sorry, I don't mean to get ahead of myself. 6227 Purcell Road, 17-acre property, had it zoned FP1. Sold part of the property that his house was on, and now wants to sell this FP1 zoned 17-acre parcel on Purcell Road. I'd be interested in that property. Zoned FP1, it's from everything I understand, you can't put a building on it or use it for anything unless it's a legitimate agricultural use building. I've got a small custom cabinetry and woodworking business. I worked for Mark Jennen for 15 years, 14 years, took over most of his customers. And what I would like to do with that property is have it zoned RM, whatever, which I understand, then you can put a house on that And you need to do that before you can put an outbuilding on it. And then an outbuilding can be used for a small family business. I got complicated a bit more. What I'd like to do is put the building on it and not put the house on until the future, because we're not quite ready to move off of gravel court yet. So my question for you guys is, would that idea even be entertained? The property, if you're not familiar with it, is surrounded by other, there's a 3-acre parcel near it. Everything other than that is acreage in the teens and low 20s. And every one of them has a house on it. Some of them are horse buildings, horse people, I should say, things of that nature. So the nature of the neighborhood, so to speak, that FP1 property is standing there by itself with nothing on it. It doesn't probably, just from my perspective, make sense that it's gonna stay that way. Sooner or later, somebody's gonna do something to get it zoned to where it becomes a residential property.
So here are my thoughts. We'll start here.
Yep.
To get rezoned out of FP, you need to have a development rate.
Yep.
And I don't believe you have that. And am I correct in saying that?
At the present time, yeah, I'm a little familiar with what you're saying. There's allegedly, according to Schillingstead, the owner, a potential to buy from a farmer a couple of splits.
So what you're referencing is a transfer of a development. And we're in the process right now of putting together a policy in our township allowing for a transfer of development rights.
Mhm.
However, the language that we, at least at this point, have come up with would prohibit transferring a development rate onto property zoned FP. And it's FP1, FP35, FPD, and also NRC, which is Natural Resource Conservation. So even with that policy, should it go in place the way we, at least at this point, have the language in place, that FP1 property would not be eligible to be a receiver of a development right from another location. So I would, in my opinion, I don't think that property will be residential.
Okay.
And so I know we have Brian standing with us tonight from the county, and I'd be interested in his viewpoint on that.
Well, we're going to be talking a little bit later about some of the proposed plan map changes. So not knowing this specific property, I don't know if that would remain in farmland preservation under those changes or not. So that's one thing to consider.
Rural development.
What's that?
Rural development, if we.
Okay, so if that goes into effect, if you do change the area that this property is into a different planning category, then that 1/35 density policy would no longer apply, and presumably there could be development potential there. The other comment I would just make is that if the proposal is to do a purely commercial operation without a residence there may be other options for zoning, such as limited commercial, for example, which sounds like it would be a good fit for the kind of contractor sorts of woodworking types of things that, if I understand correctly, you're proposing to do on the property. It would allow for residential use for a caretaker under a conditional use permit, but not by right as a permitted use. So that's another another thought. There's
Limited family business, you need to have a residence there, don't you?
You do. There has to be a family residing on the business, on the property for there to be a limited family business.
Right, my, just to respond to your, to have it zone limited commercial, is that how you referred to it?
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be ideal. I feel like, if any of you guys know Purcell Road and know the surroundings, that'd be better for me, but frankly, because of its surroundings, houses around it on it just made more sense that in my mind that it's gonna end up being a residential. But if we can pursue the limited commercial.
Limited commercial is intended for uses that from, say, a public right of way, look and function similar to the way a farm might. So larger
Fits that.
utilitarian accessory buildings. Not a lot of customer traffic. Most of the activities that would occur inside the accessory building. There's some conditional use permits for things like outdoor storage and things like that. But because they're conditional use permits, you can put conditions on them to do things like screening if necessary. You can set limits on the types of the uses that are permitted there. If it's an issue of trying to, address impact on neighbors from potential commercial uses there in the future, the uses that are permitted are fairly narrow. And then the other uses are done through the conditional use permit process. The reason that would work, I think, in the short term, given your plan, is that I believe the town of Oregon does not count commercial rezones under the current plan, at least, under its density policy. As I said, the other solution, though, that may solve that problem is depending on how that area ends up getting mapped in the revision of the comprehensive plan. If it's no longer shown in a farmland preservation area, then there would be no reason that it couldn't be rezoned, I think, at that point. Assuming that siting criteria, road access, all those other kinds of things. That it couldn't be rezoned at some point to allow for a residence or a limited family business. Once that map change goes into effect.
We do have a couple, I think they at one time were landscaping businesses in our township that are still commercial buildings and they're by themselves in rural FP zoned areas outside of the building itself being commercial. And I don't know how the plan commission would feel about having another building like that. But
And that's kind of why I'm here.
I don't believe, I just don't see where residential is gonna be a fit on that property unless, as Brian says, there's a change to our land use map on.
Well, frankly, I'd be more in favor of limited commercial than I would the residential. There's pros and cons to that, but let's say I want to pursue that. In some regards, it might work better for me. And everything that Brian described about how a limited commercial property would generally be seen and how it should look and how it should work, function, is right in the wheelhouse of what I need. What I need is essentially a machine shed on a rural property. And that particular property is an 1/8 of a mile, if that, from the backyard of the house that I don't particularly want to move out of just right now. So that's a desirable idea for me.
Have you talked to Roger Lane at the county by chance at all? He's Dane County zoning.
No, actually, I've exchanged an email with you about a different property, but I'm not familiar with Roger Lane.
Okay.
He'd be the one who could tell you whether your use fits within an LC zoning district or not, or limited, or what other zoning options would be available.
Brian, not to interrupt, but don't we really have to see where everything's going with what we're doing with this? I mean, to me, he just needs to sit back and be on hold until we figure out the whole situation with what we're doing with all these properties. There's a lot of hypothetical questions out there that 3 hours from now could be 100% changed on what is discussed here tonight.
Right.
Yeah, I agree, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, it
We've
should
got to
just
get
be-
our land use
Hang
plan.
tight and see what becomes of this and then maybe readdress that question, a couple weeks from now or something, or.
But I think in the meantime, if you want to contact Roger Lane, it would maybe give you another perspective on what your options are. And but you're going to have to wait till we get our land use plan nailed down. I can't give you a date on that, unfortunately. And I don't know how soon that property will sell.
Well, and that's the only. I'm in no hurry. I mean, everybody's in somewhat of a hurry, but I don't expect this to be a quick process. That would be my only concern is whether anybody else would buy the property. Frankly, I don't think anybody else is gonna buy the property because you can't do anything with that property. That FP1 property, I can tell you that the owner thinks that he has a buyer who's going to buy some two splits from a farmer and turn it into two properties in, what do you say, April or May of this year, when you guys get the transfer development rights policy in place. Now, clearly, you've explained to me tonight that that's just not gonna work with an FP1 property. But this is also a guy who's trying to sell something. I mean, he'd love to have whoever's willing to give him money believe that, whether he knows it's true or not.
And again, going back what Jason said, I can't, I'm only going by what we've discussed so far regarding the policy for transfer development rates, and that could change before it's all said and done as well, so, you know.
If I want to check back in a couple of weeks, what's the most efficient way for me to do that? Is it to come to these meetings?
The meetings are the best way, or keep in touch with our clerk's office, I guess, is if you have questions, they can relay information back and forth, so.
So if I just go to the clerk's office with has anything changed on this topic?
Yes.
That's an efficient way to do it.
Anytime.
Otherwise, I'm wasting all of your time to ask the same question every third Tuesday or whatever it is.
My guess is 2 weeks won't get it. You'll have to try for a month or 6 weeks, but
10-4, exactly, and that's what I'm driving at is, you know, if I can do something with this, great. If I can't, what's the most expedient way for me to get told no? Or better yet, this is how you pursue it. I'll reach out to Roger Lane. If I Google him, like.
I got his contact information.
Okay, awesome. All right. All right, thanks for your time, guys.
I should ask, are there any other public comments? Anybody else?
Sorry.
If not, we go back to communications. Anybody have communications?
I only have communication about a meeting for April,
Email
there's
address.
an election, then the town board meeting, and then the annual meeting is on the date that we would normally have. So we have the option of, if we want one in April, either doing it on a different day than Tuesday, or doing it on April 26th, which is the last Tuesday of the month.
His direct phone number.
It's up to you guys, but that's what I got.
Harlan, April 26th, sound like it's gonna work for you?
Don't see any problem.
Sharon?
Left my calendar at home, but that's it.
26 is
guy,
fine.
just to let you know.
Jim, I can make the 26.
He's really nice, but he's starting.
I think so. I mean, go ahead and ask her.
Yeah, I'll put it on the calendar.
When's the annual meeting?
The next,
The night, yeah.
I'm out of here by then.
board meetings at 12.
26 works for me too.
I think we can plan on April 26th.
Perfect, thank you.
I do have a couple things to add. People have been asking me about how long I plan to stay on the planning commission. And got an answer for you tonight. Check with Stephanie. And my term expires in June. And I will not be signing on for another term. So I will be, June will be my last meeting. And in all honesty, April, May, and June are the 3 busiest months on my farm. And I'm not sure how available I will be the next 3 months. So I think going forward, as far as the update to the land use plan goes, I'm gonna, at least my plan is I'm gonna pretty much stay out of the decision making. I think it should be left up to the people who are gonna be working with the land use plan on a monthly basis to decide what direction to take the township and to finish this out. And I should remind you that we have a list of 8 recommended changes. None of those 8 have been acted on by the planning commission. We have not had any formal vote. We have not made any motions or approved anything. And so you are allowed to go any direction you want on any of those 8. And I have all the confidence in the world that you will make the right decisions and send the township in the right direction because you always have done such a great job. And I appreciate the opportunity to have worked with you guys over this is a little over 19 years for me. So it's been a good run. And so I thought tonight would be an appropriate time to make it known that what my plans are. And unless you have questions, I will entertain motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Brian, I want to thank you for the 19 years that you have put in this. Very a lot of hours, a lot of meetings. A lot of knowledge that we're gonna lose. I really appreciate what you've done for us as a board, the planning commission board, and the town residents.
Okay.
Wait till Jennifer gets back, and then we'll start the board meeting. Okay, it is Tuesday, March 5th, 2022 at 7:30 PM. I call this special town board meeting to order. Oregon Town Hall, 1138 Union Road, Oregon, Wisconsin. Take a roll call.
Jason Marshall,
Here.
Fred Clark,
Here.
Wayne Ace,
Here.
Arlen Christensen,
Here.
and Kate Gladding is. I don't know.
And 3 is discussion of possible action by the town board driveway variance of 823 Whispering Oak Road. Jared Hoy. Everybody heard everything? Has anybody got any questions? Arlen?
No, I got no questions.
I have a comment. I have to abstain from the vote because my business that I work for is bidding on the project, so I feel that I should abstain from the vote.
All right, thank you. Jason?
My only question, I didn't think of it till now, everybody, and I'm not familiar with that, worried about the runoff, if we cut that curb out of there. It sounds like they're gonna use that so little, is it such a thing as cutting that curb out and making a drive over curb and then putting your wash rock up to that? I mean, even if they pour the cement back in, they're 10 feet or whatever, that water's still gonna come right off the cement into your ditch again. If that curb's there, how far does that curb run down that property to carry that water down the road further?
Well, the curve goes all the way down, goes down to that next driveway, correct?
Yeah.
So my concern is the water that's coming down, any water comes down that ditch. Is my concern.
What about all the water coming down the road? Is that not gonna, I mean, the curb's there to keep that water in the road, correct?
Right, and that's why if you put in cement or blacktop.
But then it's just gonna go to the edge of the cement right into your dirt.
Jason, I've done a lot of that
Such
kind
a
of work.
built
in
hill
Oregon.
there, it won't go
What they do
back.
is they wrap the curb around and then ramp it up so that the water can't run over the curb and behind the curb.
So like a drive over curb.
Yeah, well, it could be called a drive over curb, but that typical driveway, when you go down the street here, should wrap around and stay at the same level or higher than.
So that water will still
than
stay
the
in the road.
existing curb is there.
And they cut the curb back at an
Yeah,
angle.
right back.
So it still stays. in the
Yeah.
road, right? That was, okay. Was all,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've
No,
done,
no.
I've done that.
I just needed to
Been
just
part of
clean
my
better. Crane.
life's work.
I'm good for that.
And I don't have any more questions either, just that when we make this motion. It's gonna take 3 variances. One is for the next driveway in the subdivision. 2 is no culvert. And then 3 would be the 12-foot wide apron versus the 24-foot, that's the ordinance.
I'll make that motion to approve the driveway variance with whatever you said there.
Okay, the variance of an extra driveway in the subdivision is in your motion. No culvert needed is the variance in your motion. And the width of the driveway be 12-foot wide and cemented in your motion.
So you want the 12-foot wide driveway from road
It's
to
just yeah,
to the entrance, and then do you want the
Probably about 10
apron?
10
So
by
then the
12.
apron would be, or is the whole entire driveway
10 by 12.
10 by 12
Comfortable with
apron?
10 by 12, 10 foot back and 12 foot wide.
12-foot wide apron from the road.
And you can cut your-
Asphalt or
Cut your
cement.
curb at an angle, That-
Yep.
Well, they do that with that machine they got, so.
So I'm gonna put that as 4 conditions then, the extra driveway, the no culvert, the 12-foot wide driveway, and then the 10 by 12 cemented
Apron.
apron.
So I got a motion from Arlen. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Jason. Any further discussion? Just want to move forward that there will be a driveway fee with this. So get together with Arlen, he'll get you the permit, but there'll be a fee for that. All in favor, somebody saying aye? Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries with Fred abstaining. Y'all good. Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
All done.
Thank you.
Okay, item 4. Oh.
Do you just want to make a mention that we don't, typically the town board, if the plan commission doesn't see any problems with a CSM, the town board doesn't look at them again. We're meeting together tonight, but typically we don't make them wait unless the plan commission sees a problem
Yeah,
with
no.
a CSM. So I just wanted to let them know. the
You
board
guys can go.
doesn't-
We're done with.
You can stay. if
I'm
you
just
want, but
nosy.
yeah.
Yeah, having a good time.
All right.
Here, there's a seat up
You're
front.
welcome to stay, but we are done with everybody in the audience, other than Brian standing. First of all, I want to thank everybody for making the effort to come tonight. I know the Planning Commission wants to get a lead forward here from the town board, and I'm hoping that we can do that by tonight's meeting and get done here. But I think with that, I would have Brian stand and give his presentation, and then we will move into questions. And Brian, how many different segments have you got to talk about?
Page 24.
How many different segments are you gonna talk on? All these in here?
Yeah,
Are
I
there different
can,
segments?
I can run through that quickly, whatever.
Well, I'd rather have you do one and then ask for questions,
Gotcha.
and then go to the
We
next
can
one,
certainly do that.
instead of doing them all,
You bet.
and back up. I'd rather have you do this one and do questions.
Page 24.
I know.
With that, Mr. Standing, you have the floor.
All right, we can start there. That's fine. So I've been working with the Planning Commission for a number of months now, and we've had a lot of good discussions about the update to the comprehensive plan. We've been fielding a lot of questions, both from planning commissioners, and I understand a lot of questions from the town board as well about how all of this is going to sort of work together. And so part of what I've tried to do in a proposal is to take a bunch of those thoughts that we've talked about. We've talked a lot about transfer development rights, how that would work. We talked about some of the state requirements for farmland preservation, and how to, make the plan more compatible with that. We've talked about, are there other development opportunities in the town, and are they necessary to help with some of the financial situations of the town in terms of how the tax levy is calculated? Are there opportunities for more development, and what should we do about commercial? These were a lot of the discussions that we had in the Planning Commission. So what I've tried to do in this proposal is to try and take those and put them together into a suite of planning areas for the town that look a little bit different than what your current plan does. But I think that is an attempt to try and address each of those questions. So, the names of these planning categories are a little bit different than what you've had before in the past. You've called them rural preservation 1 and 2. And some of them are going to look kind of familiar, and some of them may be brand new. So farmland preservation is, as the name suggests, that's an area where areas are planned primarily for farming and agricultural activities for at least the next 15 years. 15, that's what the state requirement is. The expectation is that properties in that area are going to be eligible for farmland preservation tax credits, and it's going to comply with the state DAT cap rules for what those areas are like. So this is where we would have the 1/35 density that everyone's very familiar with here. We would be trying to, I'll talk some more about some of this in a second. We'd be trying to keep the total zoning in those areas that are called farmland preservation. At least 80% of those areas we would try and keep in farmland preservation zone. So FP1, FP35, FPP, or NRC, Natural Resource Conservation. So that would be the goal. We're not proposing a lot of changes to that. It's very similar to what your current policies would be for rural preservation 1. in your current plan. But you'll see when we look at the maps, we're proposing some shifts in how some of those areas are mapped between some of the others. The other category here is agricultural transition. And this is really a special category to accommodate the comprehensive plan of the Village of Oregon, which has some expansion plans. You'll see on the zoning map over there, there's a lot of areas that are zoned agricultural transition, AT 35. And basically, the rules there are going to be very, very similar to farmland preservation. Still 1 per 35 density policy, still predominantly agricultural use. But these areas are not intended to be eligible for state farmland tax credit. So a lot of those state rules wouldn't apply. One of the things that we were able to do, I think, in part of our discussions with the Plan Commission, is I know Jennifer, Stephanie, and I think perhaps some members of the board had a conversation with the Village of Oregon. And we got a better handle of what their growth plans are. So we were able to reduce that area a little bit. 10 years ago, when the Village of Oregon had a more aggressive growth plan than they do now, they had more areas that they were identifying that they might be growing into. And I think with an increase in density development and some changes in demographics, they've been able to reduce that footprint a little bit. And that means that we were able to take a look at reducing some of those transition areas as well, and putting them into other categories that might be more beneficial to the residents in the town, some of which might be farmland preservation, so they can get tax credits for those areas. Some other areas might be some of the other development categories we're going to talk about in a second. This next category here is sort of a combination of a couple different things. And what I'm proposing here is that we would call this a rural mixed use conservation subdivision area. This is an area that's predominantly in agriculture now. But under this plan, there would be some opportunities for new development to occur. One of those would be through transfer of development rights, so that these areas would become your receiving areas for a TDR, so that there'd be opportunities to develop at a higher density than 1 per 35 in some of those areas if you participate in the transfer of development rights program. The town has long advocated for conservation subdivisions in the town, but hasn't had a mapped area where they can go. So effectively, it's never happened, right? There have been proposals, and the town, I think, has been a little reluctant to approve them without having some idea about how they lay out. Part of my proposal here is that those areas, and some of these are going to be areas that in your current plan are called rural preservation 2. And some of them are going to be some of the other areas in the town, that these might be a good place for those conservation subdivisions to occur, perhaps in concert with the transfer of development rights program. And the idea is that you're getting, well-designed development in this area, new development. It may include some commercial development as well. And part of what I'm proposing is some limitations on that commercial development, so it doesn't create a problem if it's next to residences or agricultural activities. So that's the newest of these, I think, for most of them. Traditional subdivision is really to accommodate the existing subdivisions that are throughout the town, and to maybe, if this is something that the town board wants to do, maybe allow for some redivision of some of the larger lots that are immediately adjacent to those. But that's, I think, a decision point that the town board and the town plan commission can make. How much new development do you want to occur adjacent to those existing subdivisions? I think that's, there's good planning recommendations either way. And I think ultimately it's going to be a town call as to how you want to see that happen, and how that plays out with the other things that are going on. Some of the other things here, these are really sort of overlay districts. The county comprehensive plan requires that you have resource protection corridors identified. At a minimum, those are the areas where county shoreline, floodplain zoning, or wetland zoning would essentially prohibit development in. But there are also, some recommendations in terms of slopes that are, over 12 or 20%, depending where you are. And it's a very good idea to put these in the plan because landowners who are looking to buy land in the town will want to know as early as possible in the process where those kinds of features are. So if you're buying land and it's all in wetland, and one of the first things you're going to look at, hopefully, is the comprehensive plan for the town to see what's possible there. That's information you're going to want to know early rather than late, after you've put a lot of money down and drawn up survey lines and things like that. In addition, this is a new category that when we adopted the new zoning ordinance, we adopted a overlay zoning district called natural resource information. And the purpose of this is there are other types of features throughout the landscape. A good example is hydric soils, right? That it may not be classified as a wetlands, and it's not resource protection, it's not protected under county ordinance, but if it's no longer in agricultural use, if it's no longer ditched, it might revert to a wetland over time. And it might actually, in fact, be a wetland now if you went out and did a field survey of it, but it wasn't mapped that way. So what this overlay would do is it would, since this sends up sort of a red flag, right? Don't build here. This would send up a yellow flag to a would-be landowner that says, hey, there's something here you might want to check out, right? Maybe you need a wetland delineation. Maybe you need a floodplain determination. Maybe we need more information before we can decide whether that's a good place to build or not. And then the last is public lands overlay. There's a lot of public lands in the town. And what a number of towns have found is that it's helpful to have some comprehensive plan policies in there about how the town is going to interact with some of those public agencies that own land in the town. How are they going, some guidelines for, working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, working with the DNR, to make sure that town residents' interests are met with acquisitions or plans for that, for those kinds of problems. So any questions on that, on sort of that range of planning areas that we're talking about?
So earlier on, Brian, you talked farmland preservation, you had a map. You had our farm, that you were gonna change the zoning on it to meet the 80%. Where are you with that?
I believe I put it, left it in farmland preservation, but if we'll take a look at the maps in a bit, and if I got it wrong, let me know.
Yeah, because
and we'll get
our
it fixed.
neighbors you were talking about, I know that the neighbor won't want to switch there.
Okay, so, these are draft, all the maps are draft. I'm banking on, the plan commission and the town board to tell us, where they're wrong. So if there's things that need fixing, let us know and we'll change it. All of these are in draft form right now, so. Yeah, Tim.
Did I understand correctly that if something is already designated farmland preservation, the anticipation is that it would remain in farmland preservation for 50 years? Did I hear that?
15.
15.
15,
Okay, thank you.
Effective as of not when we adopt a new plan?
Yes.
Okay.
What does that 15, is that just kind of a planning jargon that's?
That's state law. So state law says that if you're going to call something a farmland preservation area, it has to be planned for predominantly agricultural use for at least 15 years.
Okay, they don't go beyond that. Or do they go beyond that?
There's some, there's a little bit of different terms that are used depending on who you're looking at. In the county farmland preservation plan, we said that in order to be a farmland preservation area, it has to be planned that way for 20 years. And the reason we picked that number is because it's the same number that the RPC uses for an urban service area. So if the Regional Planning Commission is drawing a line around the Village of Oregon saying these are the areas where you can legally extend public sewer and water, right? That's intended to provide a 20-year supply for the village. So even though the state says 15, the county plan says 20. So the idea here would be that these areas, these farmland, the intention is at least that we expect that these areas are going to stay predominantly in farming for 20 years. Now, if the town of Oregon amends its plan in somewhere within that 20 years and takes them out of farmland preservation, that's fine. There's no penalty or anything that occurs to the town to do that. But at the moment, when we write the plan or adopt the plan, our expectation is that those areas would stay in farming for 20.
Okay, if, just take the 20, we passed this year. This becomes a 2022 deadline, or as time goes on, it keeps on marching 20 years along?
Every time the town amends the plan, it has an opportunity to revisit that.
So we pass it now, it goes from 2022 to 2042 as the plan until we.
Yes, so if you decide to amend it again, let's say you adopt the plan in 2022. And you get, 1 year into it and it's really not working, and you decide to revise it again, you can start a new clock immediately. On the other hand, what the state law requires is it requires that you review your plan and consider updates at least every 10 years. But there's nothing preventing the town from amending the plan at any time. And so there's no, it's not a hard and fast 20 years. This is our best guess at the time that we adopted the plan, that this is going to stay in farming for the next 20 years, but we can change our mind. And you can change your mind at any time.
Are there any penalties to any other landowners? I mean, that farmland preservation is kind of a whole township thing, correct?
No,
Or is it per property?
it's per area. So, I mean, there are some, one of the things the state says is that you have to have a rationale for why you're designating areas as farmland preservation. They have to be based on things like, these are where our productive soils are. There's a history of agriculture here. We're not in an urban service area. We have an expectation, a reasonable expectation these areas are going to stay in farming for a long time. What it says is, it says that you can't base it only on landowners' wishes, right? So if you went out and just surveyed and said, hey, do you want to be in farmland preservation or not? And that was the only thing you did, and you mapped your farmland preservation areas just based on the people who said yes, that's not enough. The state says you have to have some other criteria as to why you're saying that these should be farmland preservation.
But if I did hear you right, there is no penalty to the township or the landowners to pull a certain property out of farmland preservation. That's our
correct.
discrepancy, and
Yes.
it can come and go.
That's right. So if you revisit this in 2 years or 5 years, and you decide you want to change those boundaries, you can do that.
That
and
helps
we'll-
with questions
But
later on.
not a farmer though.
No.
Farmers, once he gets in it, he can't come back a year or two from now and say he wants out. without penalty.
Well, that you're.
He can decide whether or not to take the tax credit
Yeah.
any given year.
Right, but
So-
he's in that farmland preservation for that 15 years.
He's in that planning area until the town changes this to plan, the same as any planning area, right? If I'm in a traditional subdivision planning area,
But you can't say the day you want in and then a year from now say you want out.
that's the decision of the town board, right?
I mean, a farmer can't do that. That's what I'm saying.
Aren't you talking about that there's another plan that goes with farmland preservation? Is there not
Nutrient management
There you
or
go,
farm
nutrient
conservation
management,
plan,
that
yeah.
cannot-
So if you're gonna claim the tax credit, there are two major things, or the three things that you need to do. One, you need to be in an area that's planned for farmland preservation in a certified county farmland preservation plan, which is based on the town comprehensive plan. So you guys adopt your town comprehensive plan, you say, yep, these are the areas of farmland preservation. The county mirrors that in their farmland preservation plan, the state certifies it and say, okay, these areas are, you cleared the first criteria for eligibility for tax credits. The second is that you need to be in farmland preservation zone. And then the third is that you need to document that you are in compliance with soil and water conservation standards. And that's the nutrient management plan, or that you would be. So the landowner makes that decision, right? You know, their zoning and their planning area are determined by the town and county boards. But whether or not you're going to comply with the soil and water conservation standards and file for the tax credit, that's a decision of the landowner, and they can make that decision every single year.
Brian, just to follow up, so if a farm is in farmland preservation zoning.
Yep.
And it's FP1.
Yep.
They can still do 1 per 35 at any time, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they're an FP1, it's usually a signal that they've probably used up their splits because it's less than 35 acres. At FP35,
FP 35, they've got 100 acres.
yes, they can do their 1 per 35 at any time. Right.
With no restrictions. Right.
Well, yeah, the only caveat to that is that, you know, you should be keeping a sort of a running total, right? Because you don't want to get over 20% in a non-farmland preservation area. State law says 80% of that has to stay in farmland preservation zoning. And you know, one of the reasons for that, quite frankly, is a signal to town plan commissions and town boards to go, oh, wait a minute. If we have an option and someone's proposing 25 acres to be rezoned, and they really only need 2 to 4, maybe they should do 2 to 4 and leave the rest in farmland preservation zone. That's what the reason for that 80% threshold is. We are going to be working, the county's going to be working on some internet tools, some live tools that will show each town where they are on that threshold based on their planned farmland preservation. So we're hoping to provide, you know, the plan commission and the town board some feedback, so that when you start looking at these rezone petitions, you can say, oh yeah, we got lots of room, it's not a problem, or oh man, maybe we should need to either rethink our plan, right? Because we're bumping up on that 80% threshold, or at least start thinking, you know, if you start seeing 16 or 20 acre rezones, say, hey, wait a minute, is there a way we can do this and make it a little smaller? Does that make sense?
Yeah, like I say, I just want to make sure that we don't prevent, you know, one hand we're talking about, we maybe need a few more houses out here.
Right.
But if the people that got the splits and the farmland are prevented from doing that.
Yeah, no, nothing in this proposal would prevent any farmer from doing their 1 per 35. That's we're holding to that.
How far along are you guys with your percentage that you just talked about with the?
Well, I mean, some of this may depend on how you change them. I mean, one of the things we're looking at, and I'll get to this in a second, is changing those maps a bit.
Yeah.
So that you guys have a little more wiggle room, right? I mean, right now, quite frankly, you're probably pretty close to.
And that's what I'm
80%.
wondering, you know, what can we do and what can we not do?
Yeah, I mean,
Percentage.
right. So, I mean, the two things that the town can do is, first off, you know, try and limit the amount of acreage that's rezoned in those farmland preservation areas, right? To what's really needed, right? And that's something we do all the time, you know, whenever you get those kinds of petitions, you know, there's a lot of discussion, I know, with the plan commission now, where they say, hey, do you really need to rezone 16 acres of this? Can you make do with less? So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, periodically, you know, you're going to be amending your plan now. And if you've got large areas that are zoned something other than farmland preservation, maybe it's time to put them in a different category, like this rural mixed use conservation subdivision category, right? So that's sort of how that dynamic is intended. But that's one of the reasons why, you know, the expectation is, you know, you're going to be amending this plan again. This isn't going to be a plan that you adopt once and never look at again for, you know, the next 20 years. Periodically, you may need to make some tweaks to it. And so that's what they want. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide, please. So this is sort of a comparison of what some of those policies might look like in, you know, these major planning categories. So farmland preservation it is one of these two, farmland preservation and that transitional area, are probably the most restrictive in terms of what would be allowed. But they're very similar to what you have now in rural preservation 1 and in the agricultural transition areas. Density policy is 1 per 35. If we're looking at TDR, this proposal, and again, this is a draft, and this is something that I think, you know, the commission and the town board should discuss, is that in these farmland preservation areas, we're suggesting that these would be sending areas only. This is what Brian was referring to earlier about, you know, could I use an FP1 area as a receiving area? And under this proposal, the answer would be no. And part of that is because that also helps you with that 80%, right? If you're redirecting development out of these farmland preservation areas, right? That's acreage you don't have to worry about anymore. That's, you know, that's going to be rezoned, won't be rezoned, right? Because instead of it occurring in a farmland preservation area, you're trying to push it into one of these other categories where that 80% rule doesn't apply. So that's the logic there. in the transitional areas, again, remember, these are these sort of special categories that we're trying to, essentially reserve space for growth areas for the village of Oregon. Neither sending nor receiving are recommended in those areas. And one of the reasons you don't want sending areas there, because typically if you're using up a development right, you put a conservation easement on it. And a conservation easement is like any other deed. It doesn't matter whether it's in the town of Oregon or in the village of Oregon, it's still in effect. So if these areas are intended for some sort of urban growth, and you have a conservation easement on the land that says it can't be used for anything other than agriculture, that sort of defeats the purpose of what this area is intended to be. So the recommendation here, again, would be that it'd be neither sending nor receiving. And then when you get to the rural mixed use constant, let me just ask you, is it easier to go down these by the column or to go across the row and show how they're different? How would you prefer that I just?
I think down on one at a time, you better, don't you?
So across the road?
While you're on one, go straight down.
Okay, all right.
And then do the next one straight down.
All right, sounds good. So subdivision plats and farmland preservation would be prohibited, which I think you already do in your rural preservation 1. And again, the idea is, we don't want to see a lot of residential development in these farming areas. There was a discussion in Plan Commission about road frontage and when it would be required and when it wouldn't. And the recommendation here was that in farmland preservation, you would have a provision that would allow people to use shared driveways instead of direct road front. Siting, avoid the productive farm soils, limit the size of areas that are being rezoned. Those are some of the recommendations. And then what types of commercial operations would be allowed in these areas. And I'll go over this in some detail a little bit later in the presentation, but basically those things that are associated with either a farm or they're associated with a farm residence or a residence in a rural residential area. So home occupations, limited family, limited farm businesses. Limited farm businesses is actually a pretty broad use that occurs if it occurs in an agricultural accessory building or a barn or something like that. There's a lot of activities that are permitted there. We'll talk about that some more. Limited commercial, FPB, which is a farmland preservation business district. It's still eligible for tax credits. Nice thing about FPB is that doesn't count against your 80% because it's a farmland preservation zoning district. So if you can find, there's things like implement dealers or people growing flowers for horticulture or things like that, they may fit in the FPB district. And if they do, that's a win-win because it's still certified. It doesn't count against your 80% threshold. I'm suggesting here that at least for some of these things, the only ones that really require a rezone in the farmland preservation would be FPB, which is fine. That's a certified district. That shouldn't count against density. All the rest of these are things that are just done by conditional use permit. So in many cases, if it's a home, they probably have already rezoned it, so they're already counted as a split, and then you're doing conditional use permit on top of that. LC zoning, you might want to think about counting that as a split, just to limit the density of those non-farm uses in this area at least. You don't now, the moment your current policy says any commercial rezone does not count against density. This might be one in this area for this particular rezone. That might be one that you might want to think differently about that, because again, I think it promotes this area as predominantly agricultural.
They don't count as a split now.
They do not. No commercial rezone counts as a split anywhere in the town of Oregon. So in any of your planning categories, they're specifically exempted. Mineral extraction would be conditional use in this area. One of the things to think about when you talk about mineral extraction is what is it going to be reclaimed to? The town comprehensive plan has some implications and influence over the reclamation plan. So once the material is pulled out of there, you're going to file a reclamation plan. And then the question is, what use is that area going to be reclaimed to? And the reclamation and farmland preservation should be agriculture, should be farming. And it's eligible for the tax credits. Any questions on that for farmland preservation? Okay, Transitional, again, these are those, special areas in the Village of Brooklyn growth area, or Village of Oregon growth area. Same density policy would apply, so people can still do some development there. And the village has been pretty good about not exercising their extraterritorial plat review authority, where they can block land divisions. Every city and village can block any land division within 1.5 miles of its boundaries. The larger cities and villages have a bigger area, up to 3 miles. But generally speaking, if the village sees that, that someone did a split in that area and they see that it's 1/35, they see our density study, they see, that the town board, they haven't exercised it in those areas. So there's some development of, allowed there, but not a great amount. Again, saying for TDR, neither sending nor receiving is really appropriate in that area. Subdivision plats are prohibited just as they are in farmland preservation, because we're expecting that ultimately if significant residential development does occur there, it's probably going to occur within the village. Again, not required, road frontage not required, as we did with farmland preservation. A lot of these are very similar to the farmland preservation. The major difference here is that if you're doing mineral extraction, you probably want to look to whatever the village growth plan is for how that area is going to be reclaimed, rather than us just assuming it's going back to agriculture. And there's going to need to be some coordination with the village, and if there's a mineral extraction proposal immediately in that area, particularly with related to timing and if there's going to be impacts on urban areas. So but this area is not eligible for the farmland preservation tax credits, because we don't realistically expect that that's going to stay in farming for at least 20 years. There's going to be a change there over that next 20-year time period. Questions about that?
You talk about mineral extraction. I mean, we have some that end up being a lake when they're done.
Right.
Well, that's not ag, but we can do that, correct?
Yes. I mean, open space is, open space uses are considered compatible with agriculture. So that's fine. Other questions on that transitional category? Okay. Rural mixed use conservation subdivision. So these are areas that I think in your current plan includes a lot of the areas that are shown as rural preservation 2. And what I'm proposing here is that the base density would be 1/35 as it is here, but you can go higher if you participate in a TDR transaction. So, basically you can think of this as, default, but if you are getting a development right from somewhere in, say, a farmland preservation area, you can exceed that. And what we're proposing basically 1-to-1. So for every right you give up here, you can get an additional unit here in this receiving area. If you're going to do a subdivision plat, 5 or more lots, right, within 5 years, you have to meet conservation standards. So again, what we're getting is really well-designed development in this area. And so that we're getting good open space protection, we're getting clustered lots. And it also has to be compliant with the town's transfer of development rights program. With that in mind, because we're trying to get that well-designed ideal development, I'm suggesting you may want to require road frontage rather than the shared driveways. Particularly if you're developing by subdivision plat or conservation subdivision plat, you're going to be dedicating roads as part of that platting process. There are financing mechanisms to make sure that that road is constructed to town specifications, and then the beneficiaries of those new roads can be charged specifically for the maintenance of it through special assessments. So again, this is something that you may want to discuss, but I think our proposal is in these areas that you do want road frontage for these kinds of receiving areas or conservation subdivision areas. And then, in terms of siting, you've got some very good conservation standards, I think, in your current plan, and I recommend bringing those forward, talking about protecting open space, 60% of the area would be preserved as open space, looking at protecting, the natural features, wetlands, savannas, prairie types of landscapes. And then in commercial, fairly similar to what what we see here in terms of home occupation, limited family business, limited commercial, adding perhaps some general commercial, which is basically retail kinds of operation. Again, if you're, as long as you're starting to talk about subdivision development here, clustered together, people are going to need grocery stores, they're going to need other types of small retail neighborhood oriented businesses, and GC is a good zoning district for that. So suggesting that you might want to consider some general commercial zoning in some of these areas. The other one that under some it sounds scary, but it may be appropriate in some of these areas is rural industrial, and you've got some rural industrial areas around the town now. These are, on one end, there are things like sort of salvage yards or things like that that need a large area, need to be very carefully designed. Certainly it's not something that you want to do a lot of and, right next to subdivision development, but there may be certain areas where that's appropriate. Some of the other things that are a little more benign in that rural industrial district, though, might be things like recycling centers, or things that may actually end up benefiting some of the people living in that area. And then again, same thing with mineral extraction. You probably are going to want to be a little more careful about where mineral extraction activities go, because you don't want them bumping right up against a new subdivision. But on the other hand, if there's an area that's a little more removed and perhaps the development isn't going to get there for a while, you may want to consider it. And then not trying to avoid some of those resource areas that you're trying to protect in those open space standards would be the other criteria. Clearly not eligible for farmland preservation here, because we're talking about some changes in a short term that might take a lot of that area out of farm. Any questions on that? That's sort of a newer concept. Yeah.
How does this relate to our current rural preservation 2?
Yeah.
Which by its definition was saying, yes, this could be developed in the next 5 to 15 years.
Well, right now, under the current plan, I believe that all the rural preservation 2 areas are classified as farmland preservation because they have the same policies as rural preservation 1. There's not a lot of distinction in the current plan between how they're actually treated in rural preservation 1 and rural preservation 2. There's some language at the beginning of them that says these are areas that we may want to think about, but the implication is that all of that would take place with another amendment to the plan. So consequently, in the county farmland preservation plan, we show both of those areas right now as currently mapped as farmland preservation, because they have the same 1/35 density policy. They're predominantly in agricultural use for the life of that plan. Now, a lot of those rural preservation 2 areas have been rezoned over the years to something other than farmland preservation. And I think that's partly why the town is starting to bump up against that 80% threshold, right? So what I'm proposing in this is to make a much bigger distinction between what you currently call rural preservation 1, we're calling farmland preservation in this plan, and rural preservation 2, which we're calling rural mixed use and conservation subdivision. And so that distinction, we're trying to make that distinction a little clearer as to what's permitted in one versus the other. And to use that TD, transfer of development rights, as a mechanism to sort of equalize them.
Is that the only mechanism?
Under this proposal, yes. But if the town decided to go in a different direction, you could change this density standard, or you could require it without TDR. You could allow people to do more development. You could say, hey, conservation subdivisions are fine here, and you don't need to purchase a development right in farmland preservation. That's, I think, within the purview of the town and to decide how you want to do that. Do you want to tie development in this area to transfer of development rights in farmland preservation, or do you want this to happen by right? without having to do TDR. Now, what I will tell you is that if you do want TDR to work, the more opportunities you have for people to do something other than TDR, the less people are going to participate in TDR. Right? I mean, if I'm a developer and you give me the choice of, hey, you can develop it in here for free, or you can go buy a development right over, in this area, what am I going to pick, right? So I think, the town should decide how important TDR is to you and how much participation do you want it? How, and maybe the flip way of asking that question is, how important is it to you that some of these areas get permanently protected in exchange for allowing development here, right? And those are questions that I think you're going to have to answer. I can't answer those for you. Yeah, and
Yeah, what you made a statement, maybe I misunderstood it. But under the conservation subdivisions, you said maintenance on the roads can be done by special assessment.
yes,
What does that mean? Does that mean that when you repave the road, you assess it to the property owners?
yes, you assess it to the property owners immediately adjacent to that road.
Okay, well, that isn't something we do now, right?
But you can. And that, my point is that there's a lot of, when we talk to a lot of towns, they're rightfully concerned about the cost of road maintenance because it's one of the biggest costs to the town, particularly with, tax levy limits and things like that. My point is that there are legal mechanisms where you can describe that cost directly to the landowners who benefit from that road. And my understanding is that does not count on the special assessments do not count against the property tax. They're counted in a separate category. So I live in the city of Madison, and the city redid the street that I live on a couple of years ago. And we got added on to our tax bill at $5,000, I think, per lot special assessment that, they gave us some options for paying it over time. I mean, they made it pretty easy for us to cover. But the point was, our people on our street got that assessment, but people, 4 or 5 blocks over didn't.
I know in the village of Oregon, they replace curb and gutter and they end up assessing the property owner.
Yeah.
But can we do that in our existing subdivisions now?
I believe you can. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a finance expert and you may want to ask some people about it, but that mechanism exists.
Okay,
And it is available to towns for those kinds of reconstruction projects.
okay.
You're saying the roads in them subdivisions too, then?
Yes,
Correct.
yes. Yes, exactly. Other questions on rural mixed use conservation subdivision? Okay. The last category is traditional subdivision, and these policies are fairly similar to what you have now in your current plan. Instead of a density standard, you have basically a minimum lot size, and you say it's 2 acres. So you can have 1 unit, the densest you can get in that area is 1 unit per 2 acres. In terms of TDR, and again, this is, I think, another decision point for the town. You do have, and we'll talk some more about this, about 50 or so lots in areas that are currently shown as traditional subdivision that are 4 acres or larger. And if they're 4 acres or larger, under this policy, that would imply they could redivide, right? So the question is, how much of that do you want people to do? Do you want them to be able to do that by right? So anywhere you've got 4, provided you meet siting criteria and all that other stuff, and it's a good, good road access and a decently designed lot. Do you want people to be able to just redivide those lots as they sit right now? You could also say, yeah, you can do it, but you got to participate in TDR, right? That would be another option.
How do they read now?
Right now, it says you can redivide it by right. So it just says you've got 2 acres.
So the old plan, it states that they can do that now.
Yes. And that's caused some controversy, I think, in the past when some people came in with proposals to do that. And I think there was some difference of understanding, I think, between the town and the county about that. And I know Jennifer and I had some conversations about some folks who were talking about exactly that situation. They had a 6 acre or so lot next to a subdivision that was mapped in this traditional subdivision planning area. And they came to us and they said, can I divide this property? And we looked at the plan and we said, yeah, it looks like you can. And then they got to the town and the town was like, wait a minute, but that's not in the subdivision. And so we had this back and forth and I said, yeah, but it's mapped in that category in the town plan.
It's mapped under the conservation plan.
It was under the traditional subdivision.
To do that.
Yeah, and so, again, I think this is something that the town plan commission and town board's gonna have to wrestle with, right? What do you want to have happen with, you can do what you want with them, right? I mean, I think there's nothing preventing you from putting those types of properties in. You could put them in, rural mixed use conservation subdivision. You could leave them here. But it's a decision, another decision I think the town's gonna have to make.
That's your purple map.
Yeah.
Is that the purple areas?
No, purple areas are RH.
Okay.
Those are the green areas,
Yeah.
blue areas.
These are them green areas.
Yes,
that I
those are the
talked
green
about.
areas. Yes, he's got the map.
And I've got a map, I'll show you.
Okay, yeah, maybe that's something we can.
Yeah. So, I mean, the rules for traditional subdivision are pretty straightforward. I mean, they're pretty consistent with, what we've got now. The only real question here, I think, is what do you want to do with those areas that are larger than your minimum lot size, or more than twice your minimum lot size, right? And generally speaking, this isn't really intended for new growth, right? If you're going to do anything new, you're going to be in this category here, right? What this is really intended to do is to deal with the fact that you've got some traditional subdivisions out there, and how do you deal with it, right? So there's potential for some amount of growth around the periphery of these if you choose to do that, but you don't have to. You can also just narrow them down so it's just those existing subdivision plats, and you say, yep, those are things that we did in the past, but we're not doing new ones.
How many of these people do you feel even know that they have that option available to them?
I don't.
What would be your educated guess? Most of them don't have a clue.
Well, some of them did because they came in and applied. So I honestly don't have, I don't know. I mean, one of the things I can tell you that we are seeing sort of economically is that we're seeing more of an interest in redividing previously created lots. We're seeing this county-wide. Part of it is we're seeing some pressure from banks who are now saying, when they never used to before, we're not really all that interested in financing a 10-acre lot. Can you make it smaller? Can you divide it in two? The other thing I think we're seeing too is I think we're seeing some preference choices that are different in terms of homeowners than they were in the past. I think there's more of a acceptance and more of a desire for smaller lots than there was 10 or 15 years ago. So I think you're going to see, what the fact that people didn't know about it before doesn't necessarily mean that new buyers might not be coming in and going, oh, look, this is 5 acres. Maybe I can redivide it.
And that was some of my concern with the people in here earlier. I don't think they really understand the whole, they merged these two lots. Do they really understand what the value of that lot? That might have changed their mind 100%. How, when we talked to Jennifer earlier about this, no matter how we decide to do this as a board and planning commission, that we need to find some way to educate the public on who's got what's available. There's a lot of.
Exactly.
I felt bad for them people because I think if you sat down and discussed it with them and said, okay, this is what you're giving up, they might have rethought their decision tonight.
But on the other hand, if the town adopts a policy that allows them or a future owner to rebuy those lots, and again, then it may be moved, right?
Go through the process, yeah.
Yeah. And then at least the town gets, some input into how those lots are designed, what the CSM looks like, making sure things like the septic system is on the same lot as the house, those kinds of.
Just curious if you know how many people were educated on.
I don't. Other questions on that traditional subdivision? All right, next slide, please. There was a lot of discussion in Plan Commission about commercial uses, and people have got a lot of questions about what kinds of commercial activities can we allow in the town. And I wanted to run through some, things that are available, first everywhere, and then what some other zoning districts would allow. Anywhere you have a residence, a single family residence under Dane County zoning, you can do a home occupation. That's a permitted use. You don't need a special permit to do it. It takes place within a dwelling, no more than one non-family employee. You don't keep a lot of stock around other than what you'd have in sort of your household sort of supplies. So you can keep samples, but you don't sell them on the premises. So it's not a retail operation. No mechanical equipment except, a sewing machine or something that you might have, or a wood saw or something that you might have domestically, right? Keep in mind, this is inside the house itself, not the accessory building, not the garage, right? No internal or external alterations. No more than 25% of the floor area of 1 story of the dwelling is devoted to the occupation. Entrance to the occupation is within the building. You can't have a separate entrance to the business. And then basically it just looks like a house, right? I stand on the street. I don't know what's going on in there. I don't see lots of cars coming in and out. I don't see smoke billowing out of the side or weird noises coming from it. It's a house. And 1 sign is permitted, which is fairly small, but there's a little bit of signage permitted. What that activity is, as long as it meets all those criteria, we don't care. It could be anything, right? It's just a home occupation. And that's current zoning. So that's permitted by right anywhere you have a single family residence. Yeah, Tim.
Examples, a daycare center where there's only 1 employee added to the mom who owns the house.
Daycare centers may or may not be a special case. I think one employee and 1 kid, kind of thing, probably fall into this category as a home occupation. As they get larger, there are different criteria. I think what's the state standard is 8. Yeah, anything under 8 is basically a permitted use.
8 children.
8 children. Yeah, anything under 8 is a permitted use and would be, even if it doesn't meet home occupation standards, would still be a permitted use where you have a residence. Over 8 is typically a conditional use permit.
But it has to have a resident.
Yes.
It can't be somebody else coming out working there.
That I don't know. I'm not sure. You have to have a residence on the property, so it has to have a single family residence. But whether the employees, the people doing daycare have to live on the property, that I don't. Okay, at least 1 does. I defer to your.
Yeah, we just had it on the board of adjustment.
Yeah, you may be more familiar with that than I from that experience. Yeah, so there are certainly daycare options that would fit into this category.
I was trying to think of what other kind of options in order for me to help understand.
So let's say, I'm sewing potholders, right? And I go to the farmer's market to sell them, right? I'm at home, it's just me, I've got a sewing machine and, I sew them up and I drive them into Madison and, my pickup truck and sell them at the farmer's market, right? That's a good example. Tax returns, people send me their tax returns. I, have accounting software. I do it up for them and get them their returns. That kind of thing, right?
How about repairing a car in your attached garage?
We'll get to that. So
that's different.
Yeah, because now you're outside the house, right?
I said attached garage.
Yeah, I think it would still be considered an accessory building, so it's in the dwelling, right? So a home occupation takes place within the dwelling.
Okay.
Any kind of home office. I mean, think about all the work that people do remotely now, right? So if you've got a computer and an office set up, you could easily fit into a home occupation category. Any other questions on that home occupation? Next slide. So now limited family business. The big difference here is now we're no longer in the dwelling, we're in the accessory. So now we're in the garage, right? And keep in mind, this is a business, right? So if I'm fixing my own car, that's just an accessory use. That's just part of the house, right? But if I'm charging money for people and fixing other people's cars, in my garage, now you're probably a limited family business, right? So it's family run, accessory to a permitted principal use. Again, there has to be a residence there. You can't just set up a shed with no house and call it a limited family business because there's no family. It's not right. So, but it's accessory to a single family residence and takes place entirely inside an accessory building. So this is an indoor activity, not an outdoor activity. All employees, you get one FTE who doesn't live on the premises, one employee. But anyone else would have to be a member of the family. And again, there's some, this is a conditional use, so you can put conditions on it, like the type of business. You can look at noise, you can look at, traffic, driveway, parking, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's not a given that you get it, but you can, you can put conditions on it. And generally speaking, they're pretty inoffensive, right? Woodworking shops maybe, or, car repair or something like that takes place. So a little more opportunity to where it could become a nuisance if you don't put some conditions on it. But generally speaking, pretty benign. But again, the thing I want to focus on here is that we don't care necessarily what the use is, only what the impacts are, right? So as long as, it's reasonably quiet and not creating a lot of traffic and noise and pollution, it's probably fine, right? And this is permitted in, one of the things that happened in the new zoning ordinance is that we allowed that in the rural residential districts. Before, you had to be in basically rural mixed use and above. Now, almost most of your residential areas in the town of Oregon are probably in one of those categories. So it's another opportunity. And we tried to build this in such a way that you could start small, get a little bigger, then maybe ask about, do we need a rezone? And that there would be an opportunity to jump in at each moment and say, yeah, that's okay here. Or, you know what, you've outgrown this neighborhood. Maybe you need to find another location for your business, right? So it's a way of trying to, build a ladder, if you will, that allows for different types of use. And you see these CUPs, I think, fairly frequently coming through. So you probably have some familiarity. Next slide, please. In farmland preservation, we have this other category, which we don't see a lot of CUPs for, but it's got a lot of potential for supplemental income for farmers in particular. These are in the farmland preservation and agricultural transition districts only. So it's not in rural residential, it's not rural mixed use. And it's a business activity associated with an ag use conducted by the owner or operator of a farm. You have to have a farm in order to do it. And basically, it's any of the permitted uses in LC or GC, which is a retail business, provided it doesn't conflict with sort of ongoing agriculture, contained entirely within a building in existence prior to 2005. So an existing barn. Landowner has to restore, enhance, or maintain, restore, and enhance the existing exterior of the building. It can't exceed 10,000 square feet and no more than 4 non-family employees. This is there's a lot of things that could fit in there. And again, it's a conditional use, so you can put conditions around it in those areas to make sure it doesn't create a problem. But if you think about, the range of uses that are permitted in limited commercial or general commercial, there's some opportunity there for people to earn some additional income in a farming setting. So, if you want to sell, so let's say you've got a farm stand, right? And you're selling things that you grow on the property, but you also want to, bring in some maple syrup or, something, or you want to sell those pot holders that someone's making in their home occupation, right? Now, here's an opportunity where you could do that in a farming setting through a conditional use permit. And so all of these, so far, these things are all fine in any of those planning areas that I discussed before, right? This one's limited to farmland preservation, but the limited family business, the home occupation, generally speaking, those are going to be fine in, whether you're in farmland preservation, whether you're in rural mixed use, whether you're in traditional subdivision, I mean, they're all intended to be relatively low impact and still provide some economic opportunity. Next slide. Is that everything? Yeah, okay, all right. Any other questions about those sort of relatively low-level commercial uses? Okay. So this is sort of what we're proposing for a map. David, I want you to help me identify anything that, we didn't pick up from our plan commission discussions. I think this was the area here we were talking about, and we put that in farmland preservation. The light green is all farmland preservation. I don't have the exact numbers, but my recollection is that of these areas in green, 94% of that area is also in farmland preservation zoning. So that would give you a bit of wiggle room with that 80%. The areas in beige are what we're proposing for rural mixed use conservation subdivision. And you can see that largely they're fairly similar to the rural preservation 2 that you have in your current plan. But we did do some swapping back and forth in here where we said, okay, look, we've got a lot of areas in farmland preservation. They're currently in rural preservation 2. Maybe we should put them in farmland preservation. And there were a couple of areas where we had a lot of non-farm residential development in an area that was farmland preservation. And in order to try and juggle those things to make that 80% threshold work, we said, there's so much rural residential zoning in here. Maybe this should be in that mixed use conservation subdivision category instead. So there was a little bit of back and forth. Yeah, David.
So on this map called farmland preservation.
Yeah.
And there has to be 80% of that farmland preservation green on this map. That's where the state rule comes in.
Yes. So anything that was colored green on this map, 80% of that has to be in farmland preservation zoning.
Okay, that's a different map.
Yes.
Okay, so
if you adopt this, right? If you adopt this as the comprehensive plan, the town adopts that, then the county will mirror that in the farmland preservation plan, the county farmland preservation plan.
Okay.
And then the state will say, okay, within this township, the areas that you've shown in green county, tell us that 80% of that is in farmland preservation zoning.
okay, so there's another map somewhere that exists that shows what in our township is in farmland preservation zoning.
Yes.
Do you have that map?
That's right behind you. Yeah. I mean, that's old, so it will have changed a little bit since that map was printed, but yes. we do
I guess I'm a little confused on the definition between farmland preservation on this map and farmland preservation zoning. What's the difference there?
This is a plan map. Okay, so these are areas that are planned for farmland preservation.
Okay.
The other is a zoning map. So the plan map talks about, these are the planning categories, right? And the policies we're going to use to determine whether or not something should be rezoned or whether a conditional use permit should be approved.
Okay.
Right? That's what the plan is for.
Okay.
Should we approve this rezone? Should we approve this conditional use permit? If so, are there conditions on it that we need to put, right? That's basically what the comprehensive plan does.
Okay.
The zoning map is the map of the regulations that are in effect on private land now.
Okay.
And you change the zoning map periodically through a rezone.
So if I go look at that map, there's gonna be a legend for farmland preservation zoning
Yes.
and FP 35, FP1 legend on there and all that.
Yep.
Okay.
It's in your book. If you guys want to look, there's a zoning map. Stephanie
the
can
correct one?
show you.
The more updated one. right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you guys have this one?
And that would be what we were talking
That's in
about.
this book.
Yeah, it would be in the book it would be in the book, the binder. It would be in your binder that Stephanie made for you.
At the very back.
It's
The map.
in your maps.
I think it's the last map I put in there.
Yeah, yeah.
There's farmland. It's called FP 35, farmland preservation district.
Yeah, that's a zoning district.
Okay. Is there such a thing as FP 35? is farmland? I think FP 35, not preservation district?
No,
I know.
FP 35 is a farmland preservation zoning district.
That's all it could be.
Yep. Yes, Harlan.
You, right now, I'm on a key.
Check.
And I say, I want to live in, I want to look at for property in Oregon.
Yes.
And I see, oh, there's all this beige stuff.
Yep.
And that appears to be that that's not ag, and that that's something that could be up for,
Are you looking at the zoning map or the plan?
I'm looking at the planning map.
Okay, gotcha.
So I'm looking at, that's the intent of the
Yes,
town that says, yep, that could be up for development.
yes.
We want to make that kind of clear that somebody intends to buy that with the intent of creating X number of lots or a subdivision.
Right. And then the next step would be to look at what the policies are for that area to determine how much can I do and what do I have to do in order to develop.
But it's a sort of development transition step. So
That's correct.
I'm just looking at something that we need to have, something that people can count on to either move forward with creating their new house lot or their new business, or say, no, it's not going to happen.
Yes.
And so having that laid out by this town in communication is going to save everybody a lot of heartburn.
Right.
And help to eliminate wasted effort.
Yes, exactly. That's what the plan's for.
Okay, so this is, as long as that this was, like I say, looking at transition, that's going to change to something else. Could be changing to something.
Yeah, so
else.
transition is a special case because that's probably going to be changing to the Village of Oregon.
Well, that's one change.
Yes, the rural mixed use conservation subdivision are areas that are going to change, but stay within the town of Oregon.
Great.
Yes.
So what percent are you at there then?
With this map, 94% of that area is in farmland
So
preservation.
there's room for some stuff to come out. We still
Exactly.
maintain our.
So, which is what you want. So 1 through 35, right, as people do their 1 through 35. As if areas got annexed or changed or things like that. So yeah, there's some wiggle room there. I mean, like I said, you still might want to take a hard look at those 20-acre rezones and go, yeah, do you really need that much? Because you wouldn't want to have to amend the plan early, right? But yeah, there's considerably more room than you have now. Because you're, I think, somewhere in the upper 70s right now, based on what we have.
Brian, what would be your recommendation for? I mean, everybody's conserving ag land and whatnot. There's a lot of these 35-acre lots years ago, like you stated, a lot of bigger lots that were created. A lot of these are in farmland preservation. There's no way of really knowing if we say, okay, anything 35 acres or less could eventually have this TDR.
Well, it has more to do with the zoning. I mean,
well, that's what I'm getting at. Would we have to go in and rezone all them, or could we say that option is available and then you'd have to take it on a case by case basis, or?
So when you're talking about the rural mixed use conservation subdivision areas, so these areas in beige, some of those are currently in farmland preservation.
I'm talking, and I don't know where, I'm talking any lot under 35 acres. And I know there's one particular one on Tashin's property, Jennifer, correct? It's 18 acres. And that's currently under just farm preservation.
It's like FP1, I think.
FP1. Yeah, and she's wanting to know about splitting that and building a house. That's why I'm wondering, can we set an acreage and just say, okay, if you have 35 acres, a house on.
I wouldn't recommend that because there are some areas in some of these green areas that are currently in farming. They're probably going to stay in farming for 20 years or more. And yet the lot may be smaller than 35 acres. They may have been zoned to FP1, which is a certified farmland preservation zoning district. So it does not count against your 80%. right? Because it's another farmland preservation district. And in many cases, sometimes what you'll see is you'll see people who've divided off all their 1/35 splits. The balance falls below 35 acres, but we want to keep it in farming, so we zone it FP1.
I guess what I'm getting at is these people with the 35 acres, could they take a transfer of development right and take 2 acres off on that 35 to try to consolidate the housing more?
If you wrote the TDR program that way, yes. What I've proposed is that the green areas, you can't be a receiving area. Now, you may want to modify that. There may be good reasons to do that. I mean, one of the things, we see in some towns that do allow farmland preservation areas for TDR receiving is a situation where you've got, say, a farmer who's got 200 acres of land. It's all highly productive land. He's got a bunch of splits, doesn't really want to use them ever. And then adjacent to him, maybe there's, as you say, a smaller parcel. It's harder to farm. It's got poorer soils and they don't have any splits at all. And they want to trade back and forth. So that's fine. You can do that.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at. There are a lot of these 35 acre. It's smaller, 35, 25, whatever, in our township now, a lot of them out there that they're not feasible to farm. People are not farming them. They're growing up in weeds. People try to grow a horse or raise a horse and that don't work. And it's almost dead land there, just sitting there.
That might be a good reason to, contrary to what I originally proposed here, to allow those kinds of, convenience TDR splits within a farmland preservation area. That I said, we have a number of towns that do exactly that.
And then you're kind of consolidating.
That would be a good
houses.
rationale for that. You'd want to write some policies that talk about that and make sure that you're getting, some of these, smaller lots, might be leased by an adjoining farmer. It might still be an agricultural production, even though they're, the boundaries around them are small, right? So
Jennifer, maybe you could help me. Did I kind of ask what I wanted to ask right on that property? I think.
Yes, you did. And
I mean, it's
you
not
answered it.
feasible to farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's
Yeah.
not feasible to farm,
particular property.
you may be right. It may make sense that could be a TDR receiving area. What I'm saying is that you'd want to make sure that the criteria that you write into the plan policy, make that clear, right?
Yeah, that it'd have to.
And we can do
be
that.
broad, and we'd all have to, and I don't know if you take it on a base by base.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'd want to look at each property and say, okay, this is what we're trying to do.
But that option would be out there, but
Yes,
then
it
it'd have to still be addressed.
Yes.
Brian?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Sharon.
Regarding that piece of property that he's talking about, it was broke off from a larger parcel.
I'll show you what
Have all. So if this person
Correct.
has used all of the splits available for that farm,
Yeah.
can they divide that 18 acres and put another house on it? If all of the splits have been used.
That's where we're saying with the transfer development rights, they'd have to buy a development right from somebody else, which is what we're trying to do.
Right, but they still got to create a separate parcel to put that TDR on.
Yeah, and that's what TDR would allow you to do. If you said you can do those kinds of TDR transactions in a farmland preservation area, so that's step one, you'd have to say that in the plan. And say this property owner, let's say this property owner, say down here, says, yep, I'm never gonna develop, I wanna stay in farming forever, I got all these development rights, I can't use them, right? I don't intend to use them. And this guy said, okay, I'll buy one of them off of you. And so he records a conservation easement or a deed restriction that says, yep, this is gonna stay in farming forever. Then he could create this receiving area property, could create a new lot and rezone it to an appropriate zoning district that would allow for residential use.
So if it's currently zoned FP1, it's not a receiving area. As we're talking about TDR.
Yeah.
So then they have to go in and rezone, create the land division, rezone it, and then you can put a TDR on it?
Yeah, I mean, you have to do that to create the house anyway. So yes, but I mean, basically what we would do is we would say, we'd say, okay, they're applying for a TDR receiving area here, overlay. At the same time, they're creating a house. We need to check the plan to make sure that an appropriate area was preserved somewhere else so that they met the plan criteria and we can approve the TDR and the rural residential zoning or whatever that would allow them to develop in that area.
Okay, but Brian, you said check the plan. As we're talking right now, we're reviewing our comp plan. We're really doing more than reviewing. We've really dug in here. The state said we got to review it. We're way past that.
Yeah,
Now, you've been saying that FP1 and FP35 can't have a TDR.
that's the proposal that I'm presenting to the planning commission and the town board tonight. You're welcome to change that. And if, you know, what Jason and Sharon are talking about, if that's the desire of the town to say, you know, regardless, you know, we think that there's going to be opportunities where we do want to see receiving areas in a fireland preservation area. That's fine. We can work with.
So I remember early on, we had kind of talked, I think there was some momentum for, we wanted the whole township to be a sending area and the whole township to be a receiving area.
Yep.
That,
We can still do that.
okay, we would need that to talk and execute the plan that we've kind of been talking here in the last 5 minutes, right?
Yes, from this discussion that we just had with Jason and Sharon, yes, that would be different than what I originally proposed. But you certainly can do that, and I will work with you to do that if that's desired. I understand your confusion, because we did talk in planning commission about trying to make the whole town. I wanted to give you a quick view of another alternative that would do that a little differently based on these planning areas, but we can still do that. And it would help address some of these issues that I think Jason and Sharon.
Is the other alternative to do what your plan is, to just say, no, can't do a TDR at FP1, but we can take those on a case-by-case basis? And
I think you should
change,
so when we talk about case-by-case basis, I mean, or basically what we're talking about is the difference between mapping everything as a sending area and mapping everything as a receiving area. Now, if you're gonna want to do that throughout the entire town, then it doesn't make sense to map.
Right,
You're gonna be writing policies in the plan that says, here's what we're gonna look at when we look at a TDR, right? And we wanna make sure that the sending area is on, you know, productive farm soils, that we're moving development away from that, that the development area is less productive soils, that, you know, we have good quality design development, that we're not in the middle of a wetland or a resource protection corridor or something like that, right?
Jason wanted to see something.
And that was my question, Dave. I understand what you're saying, I think, but that's why I was saying on these 35 acre and less lots. I'm not talking, you know, 100 acre farms, 200 acre farm, because most of these 35 acre lots and smaller are not desirable farmland now.
Right.
They're extremely big lots that quite honestly should have never happened, you know, and they did. And that, I guess that's why I said the 35 and smaller. This particular property, they're not feasible to farm. They're.
No,
What I would suggest is that you don't.
But, okay, I see what you're saying. But then you're
Because,
back to
because
what
there
you-
may be small lots. I mean, first off, there may be small lots that, you know, may be suitable for different types of farming, such as, you know, CSA or organic or horticulture or, you know, those kinds of things. And secondly, there may also be lots that happen to be smaller than 35 acres, but they're leased by an adjoining landowner who has them in traditional crop. So what I'm suggesting is that I think you can get at what you're talking about, but you would probably want to base those criteria on things other than just the size of the lot. So the type of the soils, the terrain, the, you know, the suitability for agriculture, rather than just.
I did write that down somewhere, like a
Yeah.
broad stipulation, so if they did come to the board or the planning commission, you know, it's kind of a worded in such a broad way. that-
And I can help you with that wording. I mean, that's, you know, if that's what you tell me to do, I can write some policies that will make it clear, pretty clear when you look at a particular property, yeah, it qualifies or no. it doesn't.
It's just a way to involve, I think, more people in our township if they know that is available out there to them, because they're starting to get some, you know, calls and concerns about it. And if we actually have that in the plan and we send letters out, say, hey, this is the direction we're looking to head, there might be more people interested.
So based on what Jason's saying, and you're saying you can write some criteria, does the rules on the TDR still and the mapping still say it can't go into FP1 and FP35, but we have criteria that we can let that happen on a case by case?
No,
basis?
I would just say, I would not say the first part of that. I would say, we have criteria that will determine whether or not a TDR. So here's the criteria. You can see if your property qualifies, but I would not include that. If, go back a couple slides here, please. To that chart that shows the different.
Oh, yeah.
This one. I mean, I would just, I would just strike, I would just say this could be sending or receiving. Right?
Okay.
And this, I think you probably still want to keep that way, right? This, I think, would probably also make sense as, either sending or receiving, certainly receiving. Right? Whether it's sending or not, I think that's another debatable point. And this, if, yeah, I mean, I think that would cover it. And then, what you want to do with these traditional subdivisions. So I think we can do that thoroughly.
The county requires that a TDR policy have a TDR map?
No.
No, it doesn't.
No.
Okay, so we can just simply go with like
Yep.
box criteria here, like a spreadsheet or something.
Oh, okay. Yep. Let's see, where were we there? Can we go back to that plan then?
Yep.
So a couple other things here. We talked about the rural mixed use conservation subdivision. Here are the public land areas. These are some of the areas up here where we were able to reduce some of those transition areas based on the village growth plan. And then these are the areas that correspond to the village growth plan. Those are areas that the village is saying within 20 years could become part of the village of Oregon and further develop. Some other things here, you see the darker green, that's the resource protection corridor areas. Those are the wetlands, the floodplains, the slopes that basically county ordinances prohibit development in already. And then these little dots up here, these sort of cross-hatching, those are the areas that I'm proposing would be natural resource identification. Those are the things, you can see in here, probably a lot of hydric soils in there. If you went in and dug a pit, it's probably 50-50 whether that's actually a wetland or not, regardless of how it's mapped. So again, just a yellow flag, hey, something you may need to check out here before you go. And then the public land overlay areas. And the reason that they're overlays is because you want to make it clear that, for example, resource protection corridors, you could be in an area that's slated for development, or you could be in an area that's planned for farmland. And public lands could be either in farmland preservation areas, or, if you look at very closely at some of the subdivisions, we've got, community parks there that they're publicly owned, but obviously, this little community park is very, very different from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service land in the southwestern part.
You have a map of what Wayne talked about earlier with the small subdivision.
Next slide, please. Yes, I do.
I've seen it. I just.
Yeah, so again, another decision point, I think, for the town. So there's 49 of these lots that are 4 acres or larger. Some of them are considerably larger than 4 acres. So presumably it could be, 4 or 5 splits, maybe, not just, 1 or 2. And in your current plan, this isn't something that I changed in this proposal. They're mapped as traditional subdivision, which means that they can develop at 1 unit per 2 acres. Question is, should they? Should they be able to do that by right? Should they be able to do that only if they participate in TDR? Or should we say, you know what? Some of these things, they're really not traditional subdivision at all. They should really be rural mixed use and conservation subdivision, right? Because we've got 10 or 20 acre lots here that aren't platted. They're not part of the subdivision plat, but they're in an area that says, yeah, you can divide it up to, 2 acre lots. Was that what you want? Or do you want to treat them more like, some of these other 20 acre lots immediately adjacent to them that are in, the rural mixed use conservation subdivision,
correct me if I'm wrong, them were in the original plan, which you stated, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's not, it's something that's been there.
Right,
These people could have very well purchased these properties knowing that that was available.
could be. Now, their zoning probably doesn't allow that. You know, so they'd have to come in and rezone to do it.
But the planning commission and the board when they originally set up in 94, this plan.
Yep.
They were part of that plan.
Presumably, yeah. Now, as you said, I don't know how many people know about that.
Well,
And-
no, but all it takes is one.
That's true.
All it
No,
takes is
what I
one.
will say is, you know, legally, you can decide what you want to do or what you think is appropriate to do, but legally, you can classify those however you choose. So that, I understand that you may want to do something different than, but just understand that you're not under a legal obligation to keep them in the same category they are in now. You can make a choice about how you want to treat it.
You're treading thin water if you start taking stuff away that people have had. for
I
years.
understand that, but in planning law and in zoning, I mean,
Yeah.
let's think about when the town adopted exclusive agricultural zoning back in 1995.
Correct.
Right? I mean, in 1993, the entire town could be divided into 1 to 20,000 square foot lots, and you could put a house on every single one of them. And in 1995, the town adopted a new zoning ordinance that said, well, you can't do any of that until you rezone, and you have to have a minimum lot size of 35 acres. Now, that was a much, much bigger change in terms of what the landowners could do with their property than what we're proposing here. And there were no legal challenges to that. And I mean, there was a lot of controversy at the time, but eventually it happened. That's why I'm saying that the town has some flexibility here about now. What you choose to do is a different story, right? I mean, you're going to make the choice that you think is best for those landowners and best for the town as a whole. I just want to make sure that you understand that you have a lot of options as to how you treat them.
What are our benefits of taking them away? What
Well-
are we gaining by doing that?
Particularly if you're interested in if you're interested in TDR and trying to make it work, right?
You create more.
You create more demand for TDR, certainly. And you create more opportunities to protect land in farmland preservation. If the other thing that you gain is, think about the people here who are living in one of these subdivisions and imagine how they're going to feel if suddenly next to them, there's 20 new lots created that they weren't anticipating, right?
Part of living in the country.
Well, I know, but that, they may have, people may have looked and said, oh, look, that's zoned for 10-acre lot or 16-acre lots, right? I don't have to worry about it. So, I mean, that public opinion thing works both ways, right? If someone proposes a subdivision there tomorrow with 20 lots, I bet you're gonna hear from the people next door. And they're gonna say, wait a minute, how did that happen, right? And why didn't I know about that? So there's definitely some trade-offs there. And what, I think you can do with the plan is you can say to, these folks, you can say, okay, look, we're going to treat you fairly and give you an opportunity to develop, but we may want to put certain conditions on it. And at the same time, tell, these folks in the existing subdivisions can say, look, there's going to be a process for how this is going to work. There's going to be certain standards and parameters for how this development is going to happen. And, we're going to have public participation and you're going to have an opportunity to, speak your piece about it and work through it. So
You kind of did two sides there. Pull them with the development, but yet then these people could go by the transfer of development rights and move the rights right back in there and the outcome's the same. You're still going to get the same number of houses on that property.
potentially, but probably not because it's going to cost them more.
It's going to cost.
Because they have to buy. And what you can tell, your residents is like, yeah, we're trading off more development in this area, but what we're gaining in that is we're gaining, some financial help for our farmers. We're gaining some stability in that rural landscape that by our own surveys, people say that they highly prize, right? They like the rural character of the town of Oregon. And you can say, and we're gonna work, we have a mechanism that's gonna protect that permanently.
They would rather have that than a house built next to them.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's a discussion that
you
you
got
can
a
have.
survey.
What's that?
You had a survey done that they like the rural area.
They like the rural character of the town. So if you can say, look, yeah, there's gonna be a little bit of development next to you, but it's gonna be very well designed, it's gonna be very well screened, and you can put it to them,
I don't believe that.
well,
Well, whether he believes it or not, that's what the public hearing is for.
that's exactly
It's
right.
gonna-
Yeah,
that's
no,
why
I
the
agree.
Town board is not gonna act until people can come in and tell
Exactly.
our
I got off
representatives
subject.
what they
I
think.
apologize.
No, but this is.
Serious question.
But these are the kinds of trade-offs that I think, you need to think about.
Yeah.
And, what I have found is that if people have, some confidence in the process and confidence that that they're being treated fairly, right? That they generally come to accept the outcome. And if you show that you're taking all of their concerns, seriously, and you're working to try and find ways to address all of it. I think you'll find that you'll get support from a majority of the residents. Not all of them, certainly, but that's part of what I think they're counting on folks to do, is to look at all of these issues and come up with something that maybe doesn't make everybody perfectly happy, but at least gives everybody some of what they want.
The way we sit right now, Brian, is we've got the possibility of 49 houses to go up in those areas that you've colored.
Possibly more.
Yeah, possibly more, 49 minimum. Now, that's on the plan map. When we go and flip it and go to the zoning map for that same area, some of those areas are not zoned
That's
right
correct.
now to put a house on.
So what they would have to do is they'd have to come in and petition to rezone that property
Right.
in order to develop.
At a minimum, if everybody goes through with this, that's 49 decisions that get made at the plan commission and the town level.
Right.
What happens if on 25 of them we say yes, and on 24 we say no?
Well, that's probably for the courts to decide. I mean, seriously. So I mean, the state, no one's
Let me back up.
entitled to a rezone.
I mean, that could happen. I mean,
Could happen.
that's the protection that the town has to say, well, this site here just doesn't look good. It's really sloped and
Right.
it's
But that's
bad.
why you want it in the plan.
Okay.
Because the only thing that the statutes say about whether or not you should approve a rezone is it consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan? That's it. So that's, if you're gonna be making those decisions about who gets this and who doesn't, you should really make sure that you have some language in the plan that describes how you're making that choice.
Who determined them squares? I mean, when they set that up, do you know what the reasoning was, or did they just kind of set their eye and draw some squares?
Who here was on the town plan commission in 1990?
Long time.
You know,
It was Andy's fault.
I didn't know if you knew an answer to that, why them particular lots.
I wasn't even in Wisconsin in 1990.
Do other townships have similar things, and do they have?
Sure, I mean, these plans have been written since the
But is there,
1970s.
I mean, what are some possible reasons they would have squared out some of them?
Maybe they wanted more growth.
I think some of it was groundwater resources back then.
Well, certainly for the rural preservation too, you're absolutely right. And there's language in the plan that talks about that.
Yeah.
Was talking
It was
about-
even more
Right.
restrictive back then.
But we're talking here about this traditional subdivision
Yeah,
category.
right.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of it may have been individual landowners lobbying people for, hey, put me in that other category, right? Because I might want to develop someday. I don't know,
And
I don't
back then,
know.
it wasn't near as, I don't think, controversial as it probably is in today's world, as the township has gotten smaller.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of, and, I don't know, I'd be guessing. I mean,
Just
you could probably ask the clerk to go back and try and see if there's minutes or records of that. Jennifer's pulling her hair out over there. She-
No.
Jennifer, you dig those up?
Yeah, sure.
Fred asked you that, not me.
I think they're on tape, like,
Oh, cassette tape?
yeah, cassette
cassette
tape,
tape.
yeah,
Mhm.
maybe, if they haven't been taped over.
Because the mice haven't eaten. them
Yes,
yet.
exactly.
So I don't know. I don't know
Legit
the
question.
rationale. It's an excellent question. I don't.
Easier to give an answer if you knew, to
I don't
somebody,
think-
if you knew the answer as to
Sure.
why they got put into that.
I don't think the town needs to feel itself bound by those decisions. I think the town should make a decision on based on what it thinks is right now.
I think you need to look at the future, not worry about the past.
What's that?
I think you need to look toward the future, not worry about the past.
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose of planning.
Yeah. that's-
So I got one last question for you.
Sure.
Opened up a whole new thought process. So all these 49 that we got here at a minimum, if they came in, do we have criteria in our plan right now to handle those 49 individually and say 25 yes, 24 no legally?
Absolutely not.
We do not have the ground, Stevens.
I mean, like I said, no one is entitled to a reason. I mean, the assumption, the legal assumption of the zoning map is that it's valid on its face. And whenever anyone petitions to rezone, they're asking you to amend a legal ordinance, right? So the standards for a rezone are much tougher than they are for, say, a conditional use permit or a zoning permit. And there's a lot more discretion given to towns and county boards about whether or not a rezone is approved. As the one thing it does say is that rezoning decisions must be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Now, probably if you dug through the plan and looked at like all the policies in there, you might be able to pull something out that might say, okay, we're trying to preserve open space, or some very vague language that you could probably point to and say, yeah, in this case, we don't think it meets it. You'd probably prevail if it were ever challenged in court because of that sort of presumption that rezones are discretionary, right? But it could be about. I mean, and it would be very hard, I think, for the town right now if all of these people came in and petitioned to develop. I think it would be very, very hard for you to look at your plan and come to an intelligent and rational decision that everyone could agree was the right one about who should be able to do that and who shouldn't. I think that would be a very difficult task given where the plan is now. I think the presumption, if you looked at the plan, would be, yeah, they all get to do it. If they meet the siting criteria, if they're not in, wetlands or floodplains, if they have decent road access, I mean, all those types of things, yeah, certainly. But to just tell them no, I think would be very hard.
But then we got an HR map too, that's got all kinds of different buildable sites on it also.
What's that now?
The HR map that we had.
HR map.
RH.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay. That had all kinds of.
Well, and I think the way you deal with that is, what category are we putting them in, right? I mean, again, let's look forward, not backward, right? So we've got a bunch of properties out there. There was some history there about talking about how they should develop. Let's look at them now and say, okay, where are they? Do they belong? What category here do they belong? And let's make that decision when we do the plan this time. And say, okay, maybe those all end up in rural mixed use conservation subdivision and there's development potential there. And maybe that makes people happy enough, even if they're not exactly happy, but I think that's part of what, when I talk about making changes to this map, that's part of what I'm hoping you can help me do. Is if there are some of those properties and we've got them as farmland preservation and we really think they should be in one of these other categories, we can do that. Put those map colors around.
But the criteria has to be established.
Yes.
We have a lot of work ahead.
I mean, I think there's some there's some high level decisions you could make fairly easily. Like these parcels that we've got identified, what planning category should they be? Should they be in traditional subdivision, which is what they're in now? Should they be in rural mixed use conservation subdivision? Probably shouldn't be in farmland preservation. That's probably a given. But you've got some options, and I think you can say, where do we think they belong? And then worry about the details about what those policies are. I mean, I've been trying to present this in sort of broader strokes, and then we can work with the Plan Commission on what the specific policies are in each of those categories. Are we going to make them TDR only, or are we going to allow them to develop by right? we can hash that out. But I think for this kind of thing, the first question is, what color should they be on the map? And then, yeah, we're gonna treat all of the properties, you know, of the same color, sort of the same way. That's part of the.
That's the end of your presentation?
So I got, oh, well, I have some other stuff, but I think at this late date, I don't really want to go into it. So,
Anybody got any questions for Brian while he's here?
what I will say is, the other things that are in your packet are some fact sheets about some of the other commercial zoning districts in particular. And that's just to sort of illustrate, I know there was a lot of discussion about commercial activity and how it could occur in the town. And that just gives you an idea, I think, of some of the range of uses that could be possible, I think, somewhere in the town.
Ryan, one question for you. I guess it's kind of similar to the other one. What are we gaining with these RH properties of leaving them where they can develop or putting them somewhere else? Is there a disadvantage or advantage of just leaving them to what the original plan was or going forward?
Yeah. I mean, I think looking, you know, big picture here, how much growth does the town want? Right? How much growth do you think you're gonna get? I mean, you can plan for it, doesn't mean it's gonna happen.
Page 29.
How important is protecting farmland preservation areas to you? And do you want to make development in the town conditional on protecting areas in farmland preservation? So
It's real similar to the other.
yeah, it really is. I mean, so each of these
Oh, sorry, 46.
things is an opportunity for development to occur in the town, which has positive and negative.
I was looking at
impacts,
page 3,
right? On the positive side, it helps with the tax levy. You know, I think Jennifer's done a lot of work to present, you know, how that the rules of the tax levy sort of have to tie you to some degree of development. You know, it provides opportunities for people to move into the town and, you know, experience the town. The flip side is that, you know, all those residents are gonna start demanding services. You know, where they occur, you know, may create traffic problems or other problems with existing uses. So I mean, I think that's the sort of big level kind of cost benefit, you know, of the will of these. The issue is what, how do you balance all that in a way that's fair to everybody? So every time, you know, and then, so every time that you say it's okay to develop in this area, you have to think about what's the impact on the surrounding area. What does that do to, you know, our overall development plan? You know, and if we are serious about something like TDR, does that take away from the demand for TDR? You know, if we're opening up areas for development by right, you have to expect that that's going to mean fewer people are going to participate in the TDR.
So I want to ask a question. Two properties, the Schillingstad and the Tashan property. There's no other way of developing them without doing TDR. Is that correct? Is there any other way of getting around that? I mean, like we say, it makes sense.
You can make them
Like
developable by
Jason
right.
says 35 acres. I mean, I'm a farmer too. You get them small acres, it doesn't.
You can make it a
The big
rural
equipment, you can't even
development
get in
area.
there, you
You can
know?
make it a rural
Yeah,
development.
you put a different color on the map.
So we could change them if we wanted to. Show the splits are used up for that farmer that originally did that. We could still change them and let them develop on that if we wanted to.
Yes.
Make it rural development. And then you gotta just decide what density you wanna make the development.
That's right.
But, so are you saying to just let them do it, or they'd have to do the transfer development?
No, I'm saying no transfer development rights, just we do it.
So you could do that, yes. So, I'm sorry, can you go back? to
Yeah,
I'm
that?
not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm just asking if there's another way besides doing the transfer development rights.
Yes.
So transfer development rights gets darn expensive. I don't care who it is.
The one you're talking about is,
Tashin over there.
Right here is Schilling.
yeah, Schillingstad's right here,
Yep.
which would be in
This one.
orange, so he would be the TDR. And
That's what the
then
guy who came in here
Tashan
talking
one
about, wanting to put up that limited
Yeah.
family business.
Is right there.
And it's
So we-
And then the other one's over here.
So we've put it in rural mixed use conservation subdivision in this map.
And right now it is deed restricted, or it's not deed restricted.
It's FP1.
It's
So
FP1.
So one of the, let me talk about one of the other implications about some of this map is The flip side of 80% of your farmland preservation area has to be in farmland preservation zone is that you can only put farmland preservation zoning in an area that would be colored green on this map. So in this particular case, if this is FP1, we would have to find another rezoning district if we're going to put that in rural mixed conservation subdivision. So we'd have to do that anyway.
Blanket rezone.
Yep, and at the back end of this process, once you adopt this map as part of the comprehensive plan, we'll work with you to identify all those properties that are going to need to be rezoned.
Okay, so that's, I was curious if those people gotta come in on a case by case basis and say, the planning map says I can build here, but my zoning
different
map
things.
won't let me.
Right, so two different things. So what all we'd be doing with this rezone, with this blanket rezone, would be to say, state law says we can't have a particular zoning in these areas, so we're gonna find another zoning district for that that's appropriate, right? I think for new development, you still want to review those on a case by case basis. So we're not gonna say, so this, let's imagine this property is currently zoned FP 35. We are probably going to, as a blanket rezone, we're gonna rezone that to AT 35. Because if they're gonna develop it, we want to make sure that the plan policies are followed. We want to make sure that, they go through a subdivision plat and a rezone or a CSM and a rezone, and that you guys have an opportunity to review it, right? We're not going to suddenly turn this into single family residential as part of a blanket. We're going to accommodate the existing use on the property and in a way that's consistent with the plan, and also make sure that they still have to come in and apply if they're going to do something different, if they're going to make a major change in land use. Right. So, but there will be, but in this case, up here, if this is FP1 and we're putting it in rural mixed use conservation subdivision, we're gonna have to find another zoning district for that particular parcel and do that as part of that blanket rezone. Now, what that is, I don't know. It could be RM16, it could be limited commercial, if that's the way, that's the way we're going. We'll work with you, to try and pick those out. We did something similar when we adopted the new zoning maps. So we know how that process works, and basically, our county staff will go through and identify all that and say, here's what we think it should be. Tell us if you've got another idea.
And what's gonna be the overriding criteria, like Jason said, anything under a certain acreage?
No, it's going to be based on what the color of the map is. Right, so state law says I can't zone anything that's colored brown on this map, farmland preservation. I have to zone it something else. So we'll work with you to find out what that something else should be.
Okay, but the piece of land you just talked about, what was the criteria? What's the reason we're talking about it?
Why are we talking about moving it? Probably for all the reasons that the gentleman said, is that it's not in an area where it's likely to be farmed.
Right, so we know about that area.
Yeah.
There could be other ones in the township that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
there is.
So how are you
Correct, that's
gonna
why
find
I
those?
said something about everything under 35 acres.
That's what I'm getting at.
That's what I was getting at, but to just give them people that right without getting it, I mean, there's a lots available and are different opportunities in the township.
I want to back up to that lot where Suing said. I mean, it's a tough situation. Number one, yes, it's ideal to put a house there because it ain't good for farming. But when that guy sold that house off, he said this land will no longer be developed. Could not be built on. So now if we go and change our mind, is that fair to the landowner that just bought that house off that guy's land?
The landowners on both sides are gonna be very upset.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right.
I mean, these are.
But I mean, truthfully, it's the best thing for that piece of land is what this guy wants to do,
Welcome to zoning.
I'm just saying, I was just trying to figure out a
You're
way.
saying, Wayne, with the transfer development rights, what are them neighbors gonna think if they assumed a house wasn't gonna go there?
Exactly. Yeah, no, I hear you.
It's tough.
Right.
I mean, it makes more sense for use for land, but it's tough to do that.
I mean, you could put that in recreational, I mean, you could put it in something that wouldn't allow a house as well.
I mean, Sharon, you were in the real estate business. You'd hear all about that, wouldn't you? Or not so bad.
I'm going to refuse to comment on that particular piece of property, okay? I know too much, so I won't comment.
Yeah, I think
All right, well, it's getting late.
I think there's one more thing we need to show while we've got everyone together. Stephanie, could you go back to the map with the red arrows?
I sure can.
So that's the map that we've been working with.
Six.
And I want to show you the resource protection area on that map. Down a little there.
Come on.
The part that's green,
That's
that's your resource protection area. Can't build,
this area.
right, can't build in that area. Pretty much all public lands. Now go to the proposed map. We've got, the proposed map is you have to point it out, Brian, the resource protection.
This dirt.
All that area, all over the township.
Yep.
That can't be built on now. That's the difference that you're gonna have going from the current map to the future map.
But let me clarify, under county shoreline and floodplain zoning, most of those areas you can't build on anyway, right now. So what, I mean, a lot of those are wetlands.
These people haven't seen this yet.
Yeah, I understand.
That's what I'm trying to point out. They need to know this going forward.
No, and it's a good point. So, I mean, I think what, I think your current plan map has the potential of giving people an expectation that they can build in places where they can't. And what I'm hoping to do with the new map is to give them more information earlier about areas that are regulated under county shoreline and floodplain ordinances that are essentially off limits to development. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, particularly if you're doing new development, it should probably not be there, you know, for a variety of reasons. So Brian's absolutely right, you know, that the current map does not show that level of detail at all in terms of where those resource protection corridors are. The other thing that I'm proposing here is that we're adding these information areas. And you know, this may make some people nervous when they start seeing this on maps, especially when they understand that, because they may not have seen it before. And you know, these are areas that are not currently regulated or we don't think that they're regulated under county ordinance. If we go out and find out that they actually are wetlands, even though we don't have a map, then they become regulated under county ordinance. But just, I think Brian's right to point this out, that this is a potentially big change for, at least a perception of a big change for people who haven't seen these before.
Can you make a simple map that's just, it's Brian Standing's wetland map, so it's nothing official, but at least we know the area or size you're talking about, roads and whatever in that area that are off limits.
But I think you want to make this public. I mean, I think this wants to be.
No, I know, but just, I guess just to have an idea of what area exactly.
It's more than just wetlands, it's wooded areas.
It's wetlands, soils,
It's steep slopes.
it's just wetlands, floodplains, slopes over 12%.
It's also in a place that shouldn't be. It's in a
I
wetland.
agree.
It's in a wetland.
So I guess just, so we have an idea of what this
So
area.
you want this without the other.
Yeah, without anything else, just so I can go by landmarks and roads and
Okay,
whatever. Just,
I can do that.
so we know exactly what area technically is off limits.
It's a little hard because we got different shades of green up there.
Yeah, I'll get you a.
And they're really close
environmental
to
features
the same
map
shade
that
of
will
green.
include that in more detail.
You need to be made aware. This is
Yep.
gonna be. the
Who
future.
makes, and this is probably a stupid question, but who makes the final decision on a house being built in a certain lot? Is that the county or the board?
Well, it depends on why what we're specifically looking at, right? So if it's, you know, so the things that the county is gonna look at are setbacks from lot lines and from the road. You know, we're gonna be looking at setbacks from navigable waterways, from wetlands. If we have questions about whether something is a wetland or not, we may ask for delineation. So that, you know, the field data can override what we have in our maps. So we will make decisions based on that. The town will make decisions based on its building code, on its driveway code. You know, then there's, I think that pretty much covers it.
The only reason I ask is I've seen a couple houses in the last couple of years get built basically, and they got pumps running nonstop because they're built where a spring was always running or something. That's why I just wondered who overseen that.
Well, that's a good point, because I mean,
And they're fairly recent new homes.
The whole village of Oregon is that way.
well, yes.
I mean, quite frankly, the whole village.
It was just a quick question. It's a really good point. I mean, I think what, part of what happens is that, as I've mentioned, some of these areas are not regulated, that have hydric soils. They may have been drained wetlands at one time. You can't maintain the drainage after there's no agricultural use there anymore. So if it gets rezoned and you put a house on it, those, you may have gone out there at one time and looked at it and it looked like it was dry. But if the drainage isn't maintained, the water comes back up and then it's not. But part of the reason that I'm, recommending this sort of natural resource information idea is for exactly that, because like, for example, a spring is not regulated under county ordinances. We don't have any jurisdiction. Over it.
There's just nothing protecting these people when they come out and buy this house, they get their house built, and all of a sudden they're pumping water. It's just like, okay, who's overseeing this? I assume either somebody.
Ideally, I mean, we do what we can with the tools we have. But, I mean, there are probably certain circumstances that gets missed. So, because it's not it might not be part of what we do.
Anything else?
That answer, thank you.
Just, if this is Arlen's last plan commission meeting. Just something to recognize.
This is your last meeting as well, Arlen?
His last plan, his last
Got a good one,
plan.
didn't you?
And I just want to thank Arlen for all of his efforts. He's been our driveway guy and he knows all the properties in the township and knows the people, and he's been a great resource for the plan commission, and I'm really gonna miss him. Thank you. Thank you. Wish you all the best in your farming. Yeah, well, I need that.
He's been a real good source for the town board too. Go ahead, Aaron.
Just a question on the next sheets. Looking at page 32 here, and you've got a list of lots. I don't know what zoning
That
districts it's
is
referring to.
our fault because the headers were lost in some copying to PDF, so I apologize. So they are really useless
So
in
these are our
there, so all of
headers,
the, yeah, so.
These are all on the internet.
There's zoning district fact sheets. I will send them out with the correct headings. We lost the headings. I just noticed that. So that is not Brian's fault. That is our fault trying to add page numbers. I don't know.
Can't we blame him for anything?
All right, well, we're on.
Sorry, so.
We've been here 3 hours and I know the plan commission wants a direction from the town board, but we're not gonna do that tonight. The town board got to get together and bring it forward before your next plan commission.
Why not?
Well, we're gonna go through these 6 steps that Brian, or 8 steps that Brian brought forward. We're gonna be another hour.
That's all right. No.
I'm not so sure we should go that route.
Okay.
I think everybody got a lot of information tonight.
Yes, that is for certain.
And you need to look at the maps. I think people gotta decide what they kind of want. I just don't think the board should make a decision tonight. I don't know, Jason, how do you feel on that?
I tend to agree. I think this was much more informational than the last meeting we were at here. And I agree. I think the board needs to decide if, which direction do they want to go financially, development.
Fred?
I think it's something we can, myself, I think we could have another meeting and
Right. It's gonna take-
answer these, but I think it's something we should all think about for a couple of days before we have a meeting to do that.
I agree.
I'm done.
I'm done. You got one more meeting yet.
You still have another.
You have one more meeting yet.
April 12th
Supposed to
April
vote on
12th is next
nothing.
plan.
is the,
Vote on
board
that.
meeting. April 26th is the plan commission. We have to push everything a week back because of the election.
So is this something we would want to have a little, I guess it'd just be a regular meeting or?
If the plan commission wants to be present, we can do it with the plan commission again. I don't care. But I think it's too much information for the board to sit here tonight and make a decision on which way we're gonna head, because I think it's gonna take too much time to get that all figured out.
Is that a meeting you would like me to attend?
I'm thinking,
Okay.
I'm thinking. I guess, I know the board members are all going back to Jennifer and she'll give me feedback and we'll have to make a decision what we're gonna do.
I don't know.
I mean, the trouble is we got election coming up.
Annual meeting.
And I'm like Ryan, you know, April, May and June get busy.
And we're gonna have new board members next month.
So I think, you know, would the plan commission want to have an on meeting with the board and discuss this again?
I want to know what the board thinks. We've been waiting.
I understand that. And I was hoping that we would be done an hour ago and we could have discussed it for an hour.
So I mean, if nobody else cares what the board thinks, then we don't need another meeting with them. But if,
Well, I think the plan commission wants to know what the board thinks.
Then we should have another meeting if that's what we want.
David, how do you feel on that?
I think we all should be together making decisions. I don't. Because they're elected, you guys are elected officials. We have some input too. If we're the planning,
I mean-
going ahead, I think we need to work together, so.
I agree.
I know you want to get moving on this and get going. I totally understand that.
April 26th.
That's our plan commissioner.
I think like Ryan stated, we can decide on it. There's what, 2 or 3 major subjects here we gotta decide on. The rest of them are fine tuning that you guys can do throughout the next couple of years.
I hope we're not taking. a couple
Well,
years to get the
we've been
plan.
working on it for 2 years.
Yeah,
We did it.
I didn't-
For this
I didn't
year,
figure
you were gonna be at every meeting. doing it.
He's been here for every
Do
meeting
you
for the
want to
last
do a
6 or
joint
7.
meeting on April 26th? Would you want to do it that way, Wayne, with their having their planning commission do the same thing, April 26th?
Yeah, I just hate to push it out that far, but I think that's gonna be about our only
It's
option.
gonna be really tough with an election
with
and an
all the-
annual meeting.
Everything that's going
month
on,
of April.
I don't think we can do it
So-
before then.
You either gonna do April 26th or you're gonna look at May. That's about the only thing you can do. Unless you pick a completely different Wednesday or Thursday, which just tends to not work very well. Are you available? April 26th? I can send you an email.
Yeah,
to see.
I'll check my calendar.
It'll Be a Tuesday. Okay, the last Tuesday of the month.
Tim,
Does the board want, is the board going to ask for a recommendation of the plan commission on this or not?
ask for a recommendation?
Whether, what the plan should be?
Oh, yes, yes,
Okay, so that's still in the future too.
yes,
Okay.
yes, and that's what our next meeting is gonna bring out. That's why I say, it's gonna get into depth tonight, I think, to get done in a decent time. That's why I'm thinking of, we're not doing it tonight. I mean, I can see the girls over there ready for bed. I just hate to keep pushing.
Yeah, we are not the only ones who worked all day today and did this.
Okay, so that's what we'll do. Right now, let's tell schedule for the 26th.
Okay,
If we can change something before then, we will. I mean, it's gonna take, well, it's just gonna take time, but we're gonna do it, we gotta do it right. All right, item 5.
I make a motion.
No, you're on the board. You guys are already committed.
He's always good for that.
This is for the town board.
Get it over.
I'll make a motion.
Arnold makes a motion to adjourn at 9:40. Is there a second? Second, for any further discussion? And not all in favor of saying aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thanks everybody for coming in. Sorry we didn't get as far as I wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, just so that I know what's coming.
Well, they're pretty high traffic.
I mean, because we have some here, like
Right.
next door to us, but in future.
None of us, I mean, there's been some talk about,
Give me some time, so if I gotta make it.
there's been, there's some new designs that I know.
By that time, since about